Chapter 91. Lame Alloy. The recipe for ISE mithril is completely controlled by the goblins. It is currently very valuable on the market, equivalent in price to gold galleons, but it is basically priceless. It can only be acquired at high prices on some black markets. Many alchemists buy goblin silverware and melt it into liquid metal to make alchemical items. All I have on hand is this candlestick made of goblin silver. Moreover, it is said that there is also a refined mithril, which is more effective than ordinary ISE mithril, but it is very rare. It is said that Rowena Ravenclaw, the founder of Hogwarts, used an entire piece of refined mithril to make a diadem, which is the legendary Ravenclaw's diadem. Anjuin took the silverware from Bones and examined it carefully. He found that this material was much more dazzling than ordinary silver, and it sparkled like stars when viewed against the light, which was very beautiful. Bones then explained another metallic material to Anjuin. This is goblin ulame steel, also called ulame steel, goblin iron, goblin steel, etc. It is also a unique alloy specific to goblins, and has the hardest texture and stability in the current wizarding world. Its magical conductivity is average, and it is a relatively rare magical alloy. It is a top-level material for making space-type alchemical items. Applying an undetectable extension charm to it, as long as it is charged regularly, its theoretical usage time is infinite, and the space that can be extended is also very large. Anjuin saw Professor Bones holding a brooch in his hand. Then Professor Bones input some magic power into the brooch, and immediately a piece of clothing appeared in Professor Bones' hand. Then he retracted the clothing back into the brooch. In addition to making space-type alchemical props, this material is also often used to make items such as boxes or doors due to its solid texture. For example, it is said that the doors of Gringotts vaults contain a lot of ulame steel, and another legendary treasure of Hogwarts, the Sword of Gryffindor, is said to be made of ulame steel and ISE mithril, Professor Bones explained in detail to Anjuin. Anjuin nodded and said, "It seems that the goblins' metal craftsmanship is very strong, and they actually have so many high-quality alchemy recipes." Professor Bones also agreed very much and said, "Yes, the goblins' achievements in magical metals are very powerful. These achievements once gave them very strong racial confidence, and thus the famous Goblin Rebellion broke out in history." Professor Bones paused and then said, it is said, that there were many alchemical masters behind the Goblin War with the wizards. Those alchemical masters coveted the magical metal recipes in the goblins' hands, and some people said that the war was jointly provoked by some alchemical masters. Then didn't the wizards win the war in the end? Weren't the recipes snatched back? Anjuin asked, recalling the content of magical history. That was just a verbal victory. In fact, the wizards were not completely sure of winning. The goblins resisted very stubbornly. If there was to be an absolute victory, the wizarding side would also suffer serious casualties, and. Professor Bones paused and said, "It is said that at that time, an alchemical master in the wizarding world prevented the continued deterioration of the war." "Oh? Who is it?" Anjuin asked curiously. "Nicholas Flamel." "Nicholas Flamel, the alchemist who created the Philosopher's Stone?" Anjuin asked in shock. "Yes, and the reason is related to the magical metal that I am going to introduce to you next," Professor Bones said to Anjuin. However, this time Professor Bones did not show Anjuin the real thing, but took out a piece of parchment. After unfolding the parchment and handing it to Anjuin, he continued, "I don't have a physical object of this material, and it is very difficult to find physical objects now. The photo on the parchment is the material record that I can find." Anjuin looked at the magical picture on the parchment. In the picture, a hand was holding a piece of metal that looked very ordinary. It looked a bit like the titanium metal in Anjuin's memory, a little lighter than the color of silver, and then looked up at Professor Bones in confusion. "This is the invention that indirectly prevented the expansion of the war, Flamel alloy," Professor Bones said. Flamel alloy. Listening to this personal name, Anjuin also realized something. Yes, this is a brand new magical metal recipe invented by Nicholas Flamel. It has a firmness close to that of ulame steel, and has magical conductivity and stability close to that of ISE mithril. It is an excellent alchemy material, Professor Bones explained to Anjuin. "I see, with this metal recipe belonging to the wizards, there is no need for the goblins' recipe. Then did Nicholas Flamel share this recipe with the wizards?" Anjuin asked. This is where the follow-up story is extremely controversial. After the Goblin Rebellion was completely over, many alchemical masters wanted to find Nicholas Flamel and ask him to supply this magical metal to the wizarding world, but Nicholas Flamel disappeared, Professor Bones said with a smile. Disappeared? Yes, Nicholas Flamel has almost completely disappeared from everyone's sight since then, and occasionally some Flamel alloy will flow out, which proves that Nicholas Flamel has not died, but obviously he does not want this material to flow too much into the magical world. Some people speculate that it is because the production process of this alloy is very difficult, and some people speculate that this alloy is expensive and the raw materials are very difficult to obtain, and some people think that this material needs to use the Philosopher's Stone to make it, and the production will affect the Philosopher's Stone's production of the elixir of life. In short, this material is basically the rarest on the market now. Then Professor Bones smiled again and said, but I may be able to own one soon. Dumbledore promised to give me a piece of Flamel alloy, which is one of the rewards for me to come here to teach. Headmaster Dumbledore is so generous, he actually said he would give away such a precious material. Anjuin said a little disbelievingly. Yes, maybe it's because Dumbledore knows Nicholas Flamel. Professor Bones smiled and glanced at Anjuin, who looked shocked, then nodded and continued, yes, Nicholas Flamel is still alive, and he is also a friend of Dumbledore. It is said that Dumbledore is also one of the few people who know the whereabouts of Nicholas Flamel. Anjuin gasped, he really didn't expect this. Anjuin could understand that Nicholas Flamel was still alive, after all, owning the Philosopher's Stone is equivalent to owning the elixir of life, but Headmaster Dumbledore is actually a friend of Nicholas Flamel? Doesn't that mean he has an endless source of Flamel alloy? Chapter 92. This made Anjuin a little puzzled. Why not get some Leam alloy from Nicholas Flamel to arm the Order of the Phoenix? Was it really because there were difficulties in making this alloy? Anjuin had no clue, but this kind of advanced material was not something he could imagine at his current level. Then Professor Bones continued to introduce Anjuin to other magical metals, such as Agrippa alloy, which was slightly less strong than Ulfberheit steel. Because this alloy was invented by the human wizard Cornelius Agrippa, many alchemists had the recipe, so it was not very rare. There was also the infamous Hephaestus alloy, a type of alloy suitable for carrying curses and dark magic, invented by the despicable Hephaestus. This alloy had good transformation properties and could be converted and disguised as other magical metals, making it a very suitable material for scheming. Obviously, Professor Bones's alchemy level was not as superficial as he said. He could list most of the materials in the wizarding world like a treasure, with a very rich accumulation of knowledge. Moreover, he had most of the alchemy materials on hand, either raw materials or various physical objects that had been made into alchemy items. Observing and touching these materials with his own eyes allowed him to quickly have a basic impression of them. After introducing various magical metals, Professor Bones also explained to Anjuin the role of many woods in alchemy, as well as the application of many magical creature products in alchemy. In fact, the most common alchemy props on the market now are of this type. Many magical creature skins, furs, bones, blood, teeth, etc., are widely used in alchemy. While introducing magical creature materials, Anjuin suddenly realized a problem, that he seemed to have been sitting in a treasure trove without realizing it. He had seen many of the skins, furs, bones, and other materials that Professor Bones introduced in Hagrid's hut. For example, when introducing unicorn hair, Anjuin discovered that this wasn't the rope Hagrid used to hang cured meat, and it was the kind made of a dozen strands braided together. He had been curious before, how could the rope for tying cured meat not change color at all, always maintaining a bright luster? And the cushion that Hagrid gave him that was very comfortable to sit on was actually made of manticore fur. Anjuin had seen an even larger piece of that kind of fur in Hagrid's hut, which Hagrid used to pad boxes. And the needle Hagrid used to make leather goods was actually a horn of an erumpent. The doormat placed at the door was actually a dragon skin. He had never noticed it. Good, it turns out Hagrid is a hidden rich man. Anjuin felt that he could no longer look at Hagrid with the eyes of a normal person. In the following days, Anjuin studied with Professor Bones and identified many alchemy materials. On this day, Professor Bones finally began to explain to him the method of making alchemy items. Here, these are the important tools for alchemy enchantment, Professor Bones said to Anjuin, spreading out a rolled-up tool set. In that tool set, there were 14 carving knives inserted, 7 in a group, a magnifying glass, and next to it were placed scales, rulers, compasses, pliers, and other tools. There are two main ways to enchant. One is to directly enchant with spells, like invisibility cloaks, but this method has a poor duration. Ordinary invisibility cloaks can last for a few years, which is already very good. The other is inscription, engraving magic runes on magical materials. As long as you replenish magic in time, the duration will be greatly enhanced. There are two ways to inscribe, one is bright inscription, and the other is dark inscription. As the name suggests, the former is to directly use a carving knife to carve the rune patterns on the alchemy material, and then perform enchantment. The other requires more superb skills, using a dark carving knife to directly inject magic into the alchemy material, and then maintain a stable magic output, engraving the runes while directly enchanting. This enchantment process requires extremely strong magic control, and the alchemy effect of the finished product is also better. Professor Bones introduced the function of various carving knives, while explaining different enchantment techniques. Anjuin nodded, checking the difference between the different carving knives. One group of carving knives was for bright inscription, with sharp cutting edges on the tips. The kind used for dark inscription, the front end of the carving knife had no cutting edge, but was like a fountain pen, with a thin conduit, which was used to transmit magic. Okay, you try it. Your magic control is good, you can directly try dark inscription. If you don't believe it, practice bright inscription first. Professor Bones handed Anjuin a piece of wood, as a carrier for inscription. Anjuin took the piece of wood, then took a medium-sized dark carving knife, and tried to input magic. Soon the front end of the carving knife lit up slightly, and then he controlled the magic output, trying to carve the levitation charm rune on the wood. After actual operation, Anjuin found that inscription was indeed difficult. On the one hand, he had to control the uniform output of magic, and on the other hand, he had to pay attention to the accuracy of carving. Fortunately, the rune he was inscribing was the levitation charm rune, which he was very familiar with, and the probability of error was not high. After inscribing more than half of the rune, Anjuin lost control, causing the magic output to be too large, and the wood snapped and cracked. Professor Bones on the side nodded slightly and said, "It's already very good. It seems that your magic control is very good. What's rare is that your hands are also very stable. Wooden materials are prone to this situation when they receive excessive magic pressure. If it is on metal materials, the fault tolerance will be much higher. It seems that you are very suitable for the craft of dark inscription. Try again." Anjuin nodded, and took another piece of wood and tried to inscribe, but failed again after inscribing more than half of it, and the material was scrapped. Professor Bones was very patient and constantly encouraged Anjuin to try. Finally, after making 4 mistakes, he completed the inscription of the rune. After slightly activating it with magic, the inscribed small piece of wood calmly floated in the air. "Well done, 1 success in 5 times, and still on wooden materials with high difficulty, your success rate is already close to that of a professional alchemist," Professor Bones said very happily. Seeing Anjuin's success, his expression was more excited than Anjuin's. "Thank you, Professor Bones." Anjuin was also very happy. After crossing this threshold, his alchemy experiments could gradually begin. "Well, you have to practice hard after you go back. I'll lend you this dark carving knife first. After you gradually become familiar with the feeling of inscription, we will start testing your echolocation curse." Professor Bones saw that Anjuin's talent was so good, and was very satisfied, and said encouragingly. Chapter 93. "Rest assured, Professor," Anjuin said with a delighted smile. In the following days, Anjuin borrowed many spell-related books from the library. As soon as he returned to his cabin, he would study them and practice engraving. Charles also began to receive special training from Anjuin. They would meet every morning for a session of morning exercises. At first, Charles couldn't handle it at all, because Anjuin's own training intensity was very high. The route he planned was at least 5 kilometers long. After a week of adaptation, Charles could barely keep up. In the afternoon, Charles would return to the cabin in the Forbidden Forest for spell practice and endurance training. Anjuin set up several wooden dummy targets outside the cabin for Charles to practice the disarming charm, stunning spell, and so on. Then they would proceed with endurance training. Although it was only a few hours each day, Charles felt completely drained, but the tangible feeling of becoming stronger also made him very obsessed. One day, Anjuin, who was about to go to the library to return books, encountered Vivian in the clock tower courtyard, who was sitting on a nearby bench with a troubled expression. "What's wrong, Vivian? Didn't you say you were going to participate in Quidditch tryouts today?" Anjuin remembered that yesterday, Vivian had excitedly told him that she was planning to sign up for the Quidditch tryouts to become a Quidditch player. In Anjuin's opinion, Vivian's flying skills were good, and even if she wasn't directly selected as a starting player, she would at least get a substitute spot, so Anjuin was quite supportive of her. Seeing that it was Anjuin, Vivian complained to Anjuin angrily, "Tryouts my foot. Now those pure-blood supremacists are jumping up and down in the common room, and now they want to control our house's Quidditch team. Any Slytherin student who hasn't clearly sided with them isn't allowed to participate in the Quidditch tryouts. Even the original old players who aren't on their side are being suppressed." Anjuin frowned slightly and said, "Aren't Vanessa and Headmaster Slughorn doing anything about it? Are they just letting them run wild like this? You know how our head of house is, he's just a pushover. What can he say when facing those tough guys? As long as there's no physical fighting, he doesn't dare to interfere, and he's too lazy to. And Vanessa is about to graduate and is very busy every day. Besides, those guys don't take her seriously at all. They restrain themselves a bit when she's around, but when she's not, they make a complete mess," Vivian said indignantly. Anjuin had been avoiding the Slytherin common room for some time due to his own safety concerns, but he didn't expect it to be so tense now. Vivian, unable to hold back her feelings, continued angrily, "Oh my god, do you know what they're saying now? They're now daring to publicly declare their support for the Dark Lord. Fourth-year Viren Higgs was kicked off the Quidditch team just for arguing with them a few words. He was the Seeker who helped us defeat the Gryffindor team last year." When Anjuin heard Vivian mention him, he also recalled this Viren Higgs. In his memory, he was a polite older student with excellent flying skills. "So your Quidditch tryout is off?" Anjuin asked. "What else? Now that Rory Yaxley is leading his reorganized Quidditch team in training. With a prefect like him, I don't think Slytherin will win a single Quidditch match this year," Vivian said dejectedly. Rory Yaxley. Anjuin heard this name again. This guy was a staunch supporter of pure-blood supremacy. He had a big argument with Vanessa in the common room at the beginning of last year. Now he's leading those pure-blood students? Seeing Vivian's dejected appearance, he couldn't help but comfort her. "All right, Vivian, it's okay if you didn't get selected. If not this year, then next year. I believe in your strength. You have to have confidence in yourself. It's not as easy as you say. With them around, not to mention next year, I might not even be able to get on the Quidditch field once in my 7 years of school," Vivian said unhappily, listening to Anjuin's empty comforting words. "That's not necessarily true. You have confidence in yourself, and I have confidence in myself. They won't be able to be arrogant for long," Anjuin said meaningfully. "What do you mean?" Vivian didn't understand Anjuin's words, but she seemed to realize that something was wrong. "It's nothing. I'll support you, and I hope you'll support me," Anjuin said, comforting the girl one last time before turning and leaving. "Support me? Support you?" Vivian repeated, tilting her head in confusion. Anjuin no longer paid attention to these jumping clowns. He currently only wanted to strengthen his own strength as much as possible. His progress in learning spells was very fast. Professor Bones' explanations were easy to understand, and Anjuin understood them immediately. His homing charm had recently overcome many difficulties. After the two constantly adjusted the combination structure of the spell, it was now able to emit a sufficient frequency after activating the spell. In other words, emitting ultrasound had been achieved. Now, the problem to be solved was the reception. For this, Professor Bones and Anjuin had also combined several receiving runes. As long as the test was successful, they could try engraving them into alchemical items. The fourth group of runes is much better than the previous groups. The reflected sound waves can already be transformed into an image that can take shape, but the accuracy is a bit poor, and it's not very stable. Record it first. After testing the last two groups, if the effects are all average, I suggest using the fourth group as a prototype for fine-tuning, Professor Bones said, holding a crystal ball used for testing spells and observing the image inside. Anjuin, who was casting the ultrasonic wave spell on the side, quickly recorded the experimental data on the parchment after hearing Professor Bones' description. The two had been experimenting for quite a while. Anjuin was responsible for casting the spell to emit ultrasonic waves, while Professor Bones used a crystal ball containing different spells for reception. Each spell would be tested about 10 times. After testing 4 groups, only the fourth group could form an image, while the others could not. "Okay, let's test the fifth group of runes next." Professor Bones put down the crystal ball in his hand and took out another one. "Yes, Professor," Anjuin nodded and began to repeat the ultrasonic wave spell. After years of self-practice, Anjuin possessed very strong magic control. When using his own developed new spells, he could directly perform nonverbal casting, which greatly improved efficiency without having to translate the spell into incantations. Chapter 94. After testing it over a dozen times, Professor Bones put down the crystal ball, picked up a new one, and said, "The fifth group's effect is not ideal either, let's test the sixth group for the last time." Read. Anjuin nodded in agreement and continued casting spells. What's this? Professor Bones exclaimed, looking at the crystal ball containing the sixth group of runes. What's wrong? Anjuin asked, tilting his head. Come and see for yourself. Professor Bones handed the crystal ball to Anjuin and urged him to cast the spell again. Anjuin took the crystal ball and cast ultrasound again. Then, when Anjuin looked through the crystal ball, he could clearly see the wave pattern imaging inside. Anjuin kept changing the angle, and he could observe the holographic scene of the entire office in the crystal ball, including behind the table that was invisible to the naked eye. The imaging was clear and stable. This is... Did we succeed? Anjuin said excitedly, looking at the scene in the crystal ball. It seems so. I didn't expect the world composed entirely of sound waves to be so wonderful, Professor Bones also said excitedly. It seems that the sixth group of runes is the closest to the finished product. If we optimize it with this group of runes as the core, we will definitely be able to complete this spell. Anjuin was overjoyed. He never expected things to go so smoothly. Good, let's start quickly, I can't wait, I knew the ring structure would work. Professor Bones excitedly turned on the rune platform and pulled Anjuin to start the optimization work. The two of them made several fine adjustments to the structure and spacing of the runes on the rune platform, and after repeated tests, they finally determined the most satisfactory rune structure. Professor Bones also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Phew, it's finally completed. Next is to engrave it on the alchemy material. Anjuin, are you ready to complete your first alchemy item?" Looking at the final rune, Anjuin's heart was filled with pride, and he excitedly thanked the professor. "I owe it all to you, Professor Bones. I couldn't have completed this spell by myself without you." "Haha, don't be so humble. Without your wonderful ideas, I wouldn't have seen such a special rune." Professor Bones laughed. As a pure scholar, he felt very satisfied to see the birth of a new rune. "Regarding the alchemy item, my idea is to make a pair of glasses, composed of polished crystal lenses and polycer brass. What do you think?" Anjuin asked Professor Bones for his opinion. "I think it's possible. My initial idea was also a mirror or glasses. The glasses are best circular, so that the ring structure can surround the brass frame for a week, and then be imaged in the crystal lens," Professor Bones suggested. "Well, let's make a monocle, so that one eye can observe the echo image, and the other eye can see normally," Anjuin added. "Good idea, the materials are easy to get, I'll prepare the materials. After you go back, engrave this rune a few more times. I'll notify you in a few days when the materials are ready." "It's really exciting, I can't wait to see the finished product now," Professor Bones said excitedly. Seeing Professor Bones wholeheartedly teaching him for so long, and now helping with the materials, Anjuin sincerely thanked him. "Thank you, Professor. You're helping me so much, I really don't know how to thank you." Professor Bones waved his hand and smiled. "It's nothing, this is the result we completed together, and I also cherish it very much. How about this, I'll prepare 2 sets of materials, and one of the echolocation glasses will be your gift to me." Seeing Professor Bones being so generous, Anjuin nodded with a smile. In the following days, Anjuin practiced engraving runes whenever he had time. The echolocation spell was disassembled into 2 groups of runes, which was relatively simple, but after all, it was not a familiar rune combination, so it wasted a lot of Anjuin's time at the beginning, and the number of failures was relatively large. After several days of practice, Anjuin's engraving success rate gradually increased, and because of the long time of practice, the magic input during engraving had formed muscle memory. He could put more energy into paying attention to the accuracy of the engraving, which greatly increased his progress. On this day, in a new defense against the dark arts class, Professor Bones greeted him after the class and said that the materials were ready and he could officially start in the evening. Anjuin suppressed his excitement and returned to the cabin, constantly repeating the engraving of the echolocation spell. He prepared to adjust his state before engraving in the evening, and even Charles, who came to train, was sent to the side by Anjuin to practice on his own. After dinner in the evening, Anjuin came to the door of Professor Bones' office with high spirits. Ready? Then let's get ready to start. Professor Bones was very efficient and smiled at Anjuin, who was eager to try. Then Professor Bones took out the prepared materials, which were 2 processed circular monocles, with dark bronze frames, and the lenses were made of transparent crystal, without any curvature, completely flat lenses, and also equipped with a thin dark bronze chain, which looked very delicate. Well, I've been practicing micro-engraving recently. After all, the frame is slender, and I hope I can succeed once, Anjuin said with a smile. Haha, don't be so troublesome, have you forgotten that we are wizards? You don't need to accommodate these dead objects, you have to let these dead objects accommodate you, Professor Bones said with a smile. Then Professor Bones placed a lens on a flannel cloth spread on the table, and then took out his wand and cast an enlargement charm on the lens. Under the effect of the spell, the lens deformed and became larger, directly becoming the size of a bone plate. Anjuin suddenly realized that he had fallen into a blind spot and forgot that he could cast spells on materials. This spell can last for half an hour. Let's measure the size first, then you practice on wood of the same size, and then I'll cast the spell again, and then you can officially start, Professor Bones arranged in an orderly manner. Anjuin nodded. Professor Bones thought very carefully. Then Anjuin started practicing on a wooden disc of the same size. The first time was not surprisingly a failure. Because the surface of the engraving became curved, Anjuin failed to grasp the engraving spacing. The second engraving was successfully completed, and the time was controlled within half an hour. After all, he had practiced many times, and the rune structure was basically memorized in his mind, so there were almost no mistakes, and he also adapted to engraving on curved surfaces. Chapter 95. Very well, let's officially begin then. Read the latest at book 69, Professor Bones said with a pleased smile, seeing Anjuin's smooth engraving. Yes, Anjuin nodded. Professor Bones once again cast an enlargement charm on a monocle. Anjuin carefully raised the enchanted engraving knife, carving on the magnified lens frame. His focus emptied his mind, concentrating all his attention on the engraving. Professor Bones, on the side, remained quiet so as not to disturb him. In Anjuin's world, it felt like a long half-hour. Having gone through numerous practices and attempts, his emotions no longer fluctuated much. However, due to the time limit, the thought "will there be enough time?" kept popping up in his mind. But even so, he didn't let it affect the stability of his hands. "Whew, all done." Anjuin put down the eyeglass frame and engraving knife, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Although it was his first time operating on a real alchemical tool, he still didn't make any mistakes. "Good, try it out yourself." Professor Bones was very happy to see this and urged Anjuin to try it quickly. "Okay." Anjuin cast finite incantatum to restore the monocle to its original size, then gently pinched it, brought it to his right eye, and slightly widened his eye socket to secure the lens. After that, he raised his wand and cast a sonorous charm. At this moment, Anjuin's right eye could clearly see a wave spreading around, then presenting him with the outlines of everything in the office. After Anjuin closed his left eye, the scene became clearer. Almost the entire world in his eyes was composed of dark blue and grey-white lines. "How is it?" Professor Bones couldn't help but ask. "It's amazing. You should try it yourself." Anjuin took off the glasses and handed them to Professor Bones. Professor Bones also tried it himself, and a look of intoxication couldn't help but appear on his face. He said excitedly, "What a unique and wonderful perspective. Are these ripples constantly flowing on the walls and objects what you call sound waves?" "That's right. Even I didn't expect the finished product to be so surprising." Anjuin also suppressed the joy in his heart. "Haha, don't be lazy. There's still one more to engrave. Take a break, have a drink, and let's continue," Professor Bones said with a smile. "Okay," Anjuin nodded in response. After resting for a while, Anjuin quickly got into the zone. This engraving was easier than the first. Having had a successful experience, the worries in his heart had basically dissipated, and he completed the operation very smoothly. After completing the enchantment engraving on both monocles, Professor Bones and Anjuin couldn't help but put on the glasses and play with them together. Soon, the two were no longer satisfied with just trying them in the office. They also ran to the corridor outside the room to test them, like two children who had received new toys. Anjuin's wand constantly cast sonorous charms, and then the two observed everything around them through the glasses. the ground, the corridor, the walls, and then extending further away. They also saw two lovers secretly hiding in the corner to be intimate, an owl flying by, Filch patrolling 2 floors away, and so on. The range that the sonorous charm can cover is very wide. Now, basically, with the 2 as the center, the corners that sound waves can reach within a radius of more than 100 meters can be seen. The more I experience it, the more amazing it is. This feeling is really addictive. Anjuin, thank you for allowing me to enjoy such a novel experience at this age, Professor Bones said with a smile. You flatter me, Professor. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't be able to complete this set of spells alone, Anjuin replied truthfully. Don't be too modest. This set of spells alone is enough for you to become famous in the wizarding academic world. Hurry up and write a paper for it. I will help you submit it to various academic journals, Professor Bones reminded. Okay, but please allow me to include your name in the list of developers. After all, we researched it together, Anjuin said with a smile, looking at Professor Bones. All right, but I can only be the second author. You are the initiator of this research, Professor Bones smiled and did not refuse Anjuin's kindness, but added. The two smiled at each other and returned to the room together to celebrate the birth of the new spell. In addition to celebrating, Professor Bones also shared a lot of information about alchemy in the wizarding world with Anjuin. The current wizarding world has a special alchemy research center, headquartered in Cairo, Egypt. The British magical world does not have much influence in the international alchemy academic world. The only famous alchemist in Britain is Dumbledore. He once won the International Alchemy Conference Pioneer Contribution Gold Award at the Cairo International Alchemy Conference. It's a pity that Dumbledore himself did not spend more time and energy on alchemy. Professor Bones was very optimistic about Anjuin, feeling that he had the potential to become an alchemy master, and constantly encouraged Anjuin to study this path more, saying that he might be able to shine at the International Alchemy Conference in the future. After hearing Professor Bones's introduction, Anjuin gained a deeper understanding of the wizarding world. After learning that Britain is actually half an alchemical desert, he also began to yearn for the wizarding worlds of other countries. Since that night, Hogwarts has had 2 more people wearing monocles, one is Defense Against the Dark Arts Professor Edgar Bones, and the other is Anjuin, making everyone very curious. Is this a new style in the wizarding world? Let me play with it, Anjuin. What's this new trend? Why are you wearing this monocle all day long? With Vivian's personality, she quickly came out of the disappointment of not being selected as a Quidditch player last time. Seeing Anjuin and Professor Bones wearing small glasses all day long aroused her curiosity instead. It's nothing. This is just a gift I gave to Professor Bones. How about I give you one for Christmas this year? Anjuin was very speechless about Vivian, who kept pestering him, making him have to put away his glasses during class, otherwise he would always be noticed by others. I don't want it. I just want to try it on. Vivian imagined herself wearing a monocle every day, shook her head and said. Helpless, Anjuin had to lend the glasses to Vivian to try on. If you don't activate the sonorous charm, this is just an ordinary plano lens. What's the big deal? There's no prescription at all. Are you wearing this thing every day just to look cool? Vivian tried on the monocle, then found a mirror and struck a pose. Finding that there was nothing special about it, her interest was greatly reduced. Chapter 96. Taking back his glasses, Anjuin didn't have time to waste with Vivian, as he had more important things to do. He quickly bid farewell to Vivian and hurried back to the Forbidden Forest cabin. Today, he planned to complete his research and experiment on another spell, one based on the opposite principle of the echo charm, the infrasound spell. The echo charm utilizes high-frequency ultrasound waves, which reflect back upon contact with an object, detecting objects along the way. Its primary application is for reconnaissance and exploration. Infrasound, with its opposite principle, uses ultra-low frequency sound waves. Because its frequency is similar to the vibration frequency of biological organs, it easily creates resonance and can directly affect the nervous system of living organisms. High-intensity infrasound has an exaggerated destructive power. In his previous research, Anjuin had already overcome the difficulty of adjusting sound wave frequencies. Since increasing the frequency was possible, decreasing it was naturally not a problem. For the past few days, Anjuin had been conducting related spell development and experiments. Next is the 33rd infrasound spell test. The spell combination is triangular, test time is October 14, 1637, Anjuin wrote in his notebook before taking the cage with the little mouse inside outside. Since it was a test of a destructive spell, Anjuin had prepared many mice as test subjects. Drawing his wand, Anjuin recalled the spell structure he needed to test, controlling the magic to form the spell at the tip of his wand. Then, he brought the wand close to the mouse cage, gently tapped it, and activated the spell. Buzz! An ear-piercing, sharp sound erupted from the tip of the wand. Caught off guard, Anjuin was shaken, his whole body went numb, and his ears were filled with ringing. Then, an indescribable feeling of nausea surged up. I can't take it anymore. Anjuin couldn't bear it any longer. He staggered and grabbed the wooden fence beside him, bending over to vomit violently, with tears and snot flowing freely. He felt terribly uncomfortable all over. Anjuin vomited for at least 5 or 6 minutes before gradually recovering, but his head was still dizzy. He had to stand there with his eyes closed for a while before he gradually regained consciousness. He shook his head vigorously, feeling the dizziness gradually disappear. Then, Anjuin hurried to the water basin inside the house to wash his face. After that, he went to the mirror and carefully observed himself. Fortunately, my eyes are only slightly red, my vision hasn't been affected, my hearing, is gradually recovering, my sense of taste is normal, and my senses and touch are returning to normal. Good thing, I almost sent myself away. Anjuin checked his condition in the mirror, saying with lingering fear. The good news is that the magic rune combination for this spell has been found, and its effect is excellent, with extremely strong interference ability. The bad news is that this spell doesn't seem to distinguish between friend and foe, and the caster, being the closest, will be hurt first when harming the enemy. This is really a headache, Anjuin summarized the spell experiment, talking to himself. Right, what about that mouse? Anjuin suddenly realized that he had an experimental subject that he hadn't observed yet, and he quickly ran outside. He went to the cage, lowered his head, but only saw the little mouse, his test subject, already bleeding from all 7 orifices, completely lifeless. The effect of this spell is a bit too outrageous. Looking at the mouse that had been vibrated to death by the spell, he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear in his heart. If the effect of this spell were any stronger, he might have been finished too. Even if he wasn't directly killed, it might have caused irreversible damage. I'm still too reckless. No wonder Bones said that testing spells is a dangerous job, Anjuin frowned and muttered. What should he do next? The spell structure was basically determined, but he couldn't conduct any more experiments. This spell was simply a suicide spell, harming the enemy by 1,000 while damaging himself by 800. If he stopped researching it now, Anjuin would be a little unwilling. It seemed he had to think of another way. If I use ears sealed shut to block my hearing, wouldn't I be unaffected by the infrasound? No, that's not right. Infrasound isn't just a simple sound, it's a sound wave that directly penetrates the body to cause damage. Anjuin frowned, thinking about various possibilities. I wonder if silencing charm or quiet charm can have any effect. Do I need to conduct another test? I don't know if these spells have the function of eliminating sound waves. It's a headache that I have to create a counter spell before developing a spell. Anjuin struggled with whether to conduct another experiment. Anjuin hesitated for a long time, but a new spell was right in front of him, and it was too painful to only be able to look at it but not use it. In the end, he decided that he still had to try again. Just in case, I'll reduce the magic output by 70% during the test later. After Anjuin thought it through, he swallowed and then pointed his wand at himself, ears sealed shut, silencing charm, quiet charm. He threw all kinds of spells he knew that could silence or reduce the volume on himself without holding back. He didn't plan to test the spells one by one. If this worked, he could figure out which spell was effective later. If it didn't work, he could eliminate all these spells. Anjuin couldn't hear any sound for a while, then he took a deep breath, adjusted the magic output, and activated the spell firmly. Puke! The figure beside the cabin leaned on the railing and vomited again. The reaction wasn't as strong as last time, but it's very likely because I adjusted the magic power. Does that mean that these spells are basically useless? This time, Anjuin recovered much faster, and after a little adjustment, he immediately summarized the previous experiment. It seems I have to develop a spell that completely isolates sound waves. What a trouble! Anjuin thought dejectedly. This experiment gave Anjuin hope, but also presented him with a major problem, leaving him clueless for a while. Forget it, I'll ask Professor Bones if he has any good ideas tonight, Anjuan thought gloomily. At this time, Charles had also completed his training for the day and was walking over from a distance, covered in sweat. Previously, because Anjuan had been doing spell experiments recently, he had sent Charles to train on his own a little further away from the cabin for the past few days. Now, Charles, training and eating with Anjuan every day, had become much stronger and more energetic. "What's that smell, Anjuan? What exactly were you doing here just now? It's all sour and stinky, and there's a dead mouse," Charles asked, puzzled. "It's nothing. I just did a little experiment, and something went wrong. I'm just about to clean it up," Anjuan said, waving his wand to expel all the air around him, then using a cleaning charm to clean up the dirt and dispose of the dead mouse. Chapter 97. Charles watched Anjuan clean up the scene, didn't think much of it, ran into the house and poured himself a large glass of water, drinking it all down, then asked curiously, "How's your experiment going? I seem to remember you saying something about a sonic wave magic experiment last time." "Read. It's made some progress, but now there are new problems. I still need to find a way to isolate sound waves. In short, it's very troublesome," Anjuan replied, pondering the solution. "Isolate sound? Wouldn't the quieting charm or silencing charm work?" Charles asked. "Probably not. Sound waves and sound are different. It's not just about not being able to hear it," Anjuan replied helplessly. "So complicated? Sound waves? I've never heard of them, but I've heard of water waves. If sound waves could be calmed by the wave vanishing spell like water waves," Charles said casually while drinking water. "Wait, Charles, what did you just say?" Anjuan suddenly raised his head, staring intently at Charles. "What did I say?" "Water waves," Charles said. "Not that, what spell did you just say could calm water waves?" Anjuan confirmed. "Are you talking about the wave vanishing spell?" Charles said uncertainly. "Yes, that's it. Is there really such a spell that can calm water waves?" Anjuan asked. "Ah, I heard a senior bragging about it. It's Granda Kaituk, a senior from our house. She said she encountered waves while traveling on the Aegean Sea, and a wizard traveling with her used this spell to calm the waves. She also learned this spell from that wizard," Charles replied, seeing Anjuan staring at him wide-eyed, telling him everything he knew. "Can I ask that senior to teach me? This is very important for my experiment," Anjuan asked excitedly, hearing that a student at the school knew this spell. "Her? She's already a 7th-year student now. It seems like she ran off to intern because she applied for a job at Wizarding Wireless Network," Charles replied, recalling. "What? Is she coming back to school? I remember 7th years have to take a final magic exam," Anjuan asked. "That doesn't seem to be mandatory. I'll go back and ask the others in the Mahjong Club. Another senior is quite familiar with her," Charles replied. "Mahjong Club? What's that? Is there such a club?" Anjuan seemed to have heard something incredible. Charles put his hands on his hips and laughed, "Of course. Vivian and I created that club. You're always mysterious and don't walk around the castle, so you don't know. Our club now has more than a dozen members. What do you usually do in this club?" "Just play mahjong?" Anjuan asked curiously, feeling that this club appeared out of nowhere. "Yet. You lent us a mahjong set before, and then didn't you give Vivian and me a set each after Christmas? We take these mahjong sets and take turns playing cards in our respective houses when we have nothing to do." Later, more people liked it, so a club was naturally formed. You know, there's also the Wizarding Chess Club, Gobstones Club, Exploding Snap Club, etc. at Hogwarts. Now our Mahjong Club has no fewer people than other game clubs, and it's also a large club in the school, Charles said with a smile, knowing that he was one of the founders of this club. Such a thing existed? It seemed that he had been so immersed in research that he hadn't paid attention to things in Hogwarts Castle. Anjuan rarely even looked at the school bulletin board. He was the one who taught these two people to play mahjong, but he never touched the tiles again. Charles was very proud of the established Mahjong Club and wanted to pull Anjuan into the club, but Anjuan didn't have the mood for entertainment right now and refused him, only instructing Charles to help inquire about Senior Granda Kaituk's situation. So, that senior will only be back to the school next week. 2 days later, Anjuan looked at Charles, who had come to train, and asked about the matter he had instructed earlier. "Yes, it seems that senior's internship results are very good. It is said that she may become a broadcaster for Wizarding Wireless Network in the future, Charles replied, recalling the news he had gathered from senior students. Since the failed experiment 2 days ago, Anjuin had not dared to cast the subsonic wave charm casually, but only used the rune plate to optimize the structure of the spell a few times, but it was completely unclear what the effect would be. In his vision, water waves and sound waves are both waves. The wave vanishing spell can dispel water waves, so theoretically it should also have an effect on sound waves. Even if it's not completely useful, it should give him some inspiration, so he seemed so anxious. Okay, then I'll leave it to you, Charles. Anjuin knew that things couldn't be rushed. Don't worry, I'll go find her as soon as that senior returns to school, Charles assured Anjuin. Okay, thank you, Charles, Anjuin said, then added, seeing that you can adapt to this intensity of training recently, we can officially start special training. What, wasn't that training before special training? Charles was taken aback and stared at Anjuin seriously. That was just adaptive training, like warming up before exercise. I was afraid you couldn't handle high-intensity training from the beginning, Anjuin explained indifferently. Hiss! Charles gasped. Was this just a warm-up? He had been tortured to the point of wanting to die by Anjuin's training for the past month. At the beginning, he couldn't even keep up with the running, and the afternoon spells and delayed training were even more tiring. He really couldn't imagine what kind of cruel training there could be. Seeing Charles's slightly resistant expression, Anjuin said seriously, okay, what's the point of suffering a little if you want to improve? Immediately afterwards, Anjuin pulled Charles to a flat ground outside and said, let's proceed little by little, step by step, so as not to affect your normal studies. Charles naturally nodded frantically in agreement. Next is the first subject, stance training, mainly including horse stance, level stance, three-body stance, Hunyuan stance, etc. I mainly teach you the horse stance. Watch my posture, Anjuin demonstrated and explained to Charles. Stance training, what's that? Charles looked at Anjuin squatting with his legs apart, posing in a strange posture. Chapter 98. Stance training is beneficial for strengthening the stability of the lower body, enhancing core strength. Consistent stance training is also a great exercise for willpower. Moreover, I've discovered in my spell practice that willpower and emotions are important factors that can influence the power of a spell. So, if you want to strengthen your spell power, cultivating willpower is one of the simplest methods. Anjuin adopted a horse stance, while explaining the benefits of stance training to Charles. Okay. Seeing Anjuin so highly recommend this exercise, Charles had no choice but to imitate Anjuin's posture. Anjuin observed Charles's stance and stood up to correct his posture, saying, pay attention, clench your fists and extend your arms forward, keep your arms straight, tuck in your buttocks, lift your anus, relax your perineum, and use your hips for support. If you concentrate all the pressure on your feet, it will cause great damage to your knees. Anjuin explained to Charles while pointing and correcting his posture with a stick. Is this okay now? What's next? What do I do? Charles adjusted his posture under Anjuin's guidance, and then, seeing Anjuin silently watching him from the side, he couldn't help but ask nervously. Next? Just hold it, try to hold it for as long as possible. Let's start with 5 minutes. Anjuin said expressionlessly. Hold it. Just this posture? It's so tiring. Charles couldn't help but complain to Anjuin. How can you temper your willpower if it's not tiring? Don't worry, it's good for you, Anjuin said. Under Anjuin's gaze, Charles began his stance journey. But before 2 minutes had passed, Charles couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't that his lower body couldn't hold on, but his outstretched hands began to ache. Before long, they were shaking uncontrollably, causing Charles to wail in pain. However, after Charles started stance training, Anjuin also adopted a horse stance in front of Charles, personally demonstrating it to him, which made it impossible for him to refuse. After a while, Charles's entire lower body also ached intensely, not just his hands. He felt like he was about to lose his balance at any moment. But when he saw Anjuin standing in the same posture in front of him, motionless, he could only grit his teeth and persevere. Finally, 5 minutes passed. Anjuin called Charles to stand up, but now Charles was stiff and sore all over, barely able to stand. He had to help Charles walk back to the cabin to rest. Do you usually train like this? Are you really human? Charles said speechlessly. Can't you people use any other adjectives? It's indeed very hard at the beginning, but if you persevere, you'll discover the benefits of this training. This is just the beginning. Starting tomorrow, extend the stance time by 1 minute each day until you can maintain it for 30 minutes. Afterwards, you'll also have to practice magic power extension while standing, followed by footwork, first aid, combat training, and so on. We'll take it one step at a time, Anjuan said. You know, in his previous life, his instructor once told him, good steel comes from hammering, and elite soldiers come from diligent training. Now, Anjuan is also following this principle. After hearing Anjuan's words, Charles almost fainted. It's already so hard now, he can't imagine how terrifying the training will be in the future. After letting Charles rest well there, Anjuan went next door to prepare dinner. After dinner, Anjuan helped the weak Charles back to Gryffindor. In the following days, Anjuan constantly supervised Charles's training progress, while also collecting data on magic power sensitivity. Through long-term data, he found that the extension training method he developed was indeed effective in enhancing magic power sensitivity. He also recorded Charles's changes in magic power control and spell power. It could be seen that these strengthening trainings were still very effective. Charles's spell casting, whether in power or control, had improved. Spells that he couldn't learn well before were now easier to master. And Anjuan had not interrupted his charms training with Professor Bones. Recently, Professor Bones guided Anjuan to complete his Echo Charm thesis, and also taught many alchemical application charms. These types of charms have one characteristic, which is that they have no incantations, so they cannot be considered spells, but can only be enchanted on alchemical items, such as swift charms, strengthening charms, silent charms, reflex charms, etc. Anjuan also felt that he had gained a lot recently. After another week or so, Anjuan finally received news from Charles that the upperclassman Grandikaidak had returned to Hogwarts, and with Charles's request, she had inquired about the incantation of the wave-banishing charm, on the condition that Anjuan had to give this upperclassman a mahjong set. That's right, this graduating upperclassman was also a member of the mahjong club. He didn't know that the little game he unintentionally pulled his friends into had already gained a group of loyal fans among many students in various colleges. After obtaining the spell, Anjuan began his test. He found a large basin, filled it with water using the water-making spell, threw a stone into it to splash water, and then released the wave-banishing charm. The spell incantation was not short, and it could be seen that it was a newly invented spell that had not been optimized much, but the effect was very obvious. After casting, the layers of water waves in the basin instantly calmed down. Immediately afterwards, Anjuan began the sound wave test. He put on his monocle, cast an echo charm, and then cast a wave-banishing charm towards the void. Well, it's about the same as expected. It does have a banishing effect on sound waves, but the intensity is a bit insufficient. It seems that I have to study the runes of this spell first. Modifying and optimizing this ready-made rune should save a lot of time. Anjuan came to his conclusion after observing through the monocle. As soon as he said it, he did it. Anjuan then used the magic phonetic method to reverse engineer the spell runes. Generally speaking, the difficulty of reverse engineering runes is higher than translating runes, because generally mature spells can only reverse engineer which magic characters the spell is composed of. The specific rune structure and combination method are difficult to reproduce, but fortunately, this spell is a new spell that has not been optimized at all, so a lot of information can be obtained through reverse engineering. After spending nearly 2 days, with the help of Professor Bones, who was already a rune deciphering master, the runes of the wave-banishing charm gradually appeared in front of Anjuan. I see, this rune not only has the banish magic character, but also adds the eliminate and stabilize magic characters. This can indeed stabilize the waves to the greatest extent. If I add a magic character to identify sound waves to this combination, I should be able to accurately eliminate sound waves. Anjuan was fascinated by the analysis of the newly deciphered runes, and had a basic optimization plan in mind. Chapter 99. In the following days, Anjuan began modifying and optimizing the new spell as soon as classes were over. Having gone through the development process of the previous 2 spells, Anjuan didn't encounter any difficulties. Soon, he had modified the original spell into a combination of 4 runes. By the end of October, he began a period of intensive testing. The testing method was also very simple, mainly divided into 2 steps. The first step was to test whether the spell would harm living organisms. At this time, the rat would make its appearance. He would cast the spell on the rat a few times first, and then observe whether there were any abnormalities. If there were no problems, he would proceed to the next step. This was mainly because he had almost killed himself with his reckless experiments last time, so for safety's sake, he planned to add this step to all future experiments. The second step was to start the actual test. He named the spell he had modified Sonic Repulsion Charm. He cast the spell on himself, and then listened to the surrounding natural sounds. If he couldn't hear them, he would increase the power, asking Hagrid to shout a few times to help. Once that was effective, he would begin testing the Echo Charm. Ultrasonic waves have a very high frequency, so theoretically, if he could block ultrasonic waves, he should be able to block all sound waves. Finally, he would test the infrasonic charm one more time. The new combination of 4 runes can block natural sounds, Anjuin thought after the experiment. However, only rune number 3 can completely block ultrasonic waves, so I'll use this rune as the main body for optimization. Anjuin didn't rashly try the infrasonic charm experiment. He wasn't prepared to experience being attacked by his own spell again, so he used the best performing set of rune combinations as the basis for secondary optimization. He decided to prepare completely before conducting the final experiment. After several more days of adjusting the spell and repeatedly experimenting with ultrasonic waves, Anjuin finally decided to start testing the infrasonic charm. Time, October 31, 1938 p.m., infrasonic charm second test record begins. Today was Halloween, and Hogwarts had prepared a sumptuous Christmas dinner for the students, as well as monster performances and the like, but Anjuin wasn't interested in any of that. He decided to test the infrasonic charm again. This time, he made all the preparations, even preparing 2 bottles of healing potions for himself, and asked Hagrid to keep an eye on him from a distance, so that he could come and help immediately if anything unexpected happened. Huff! Anjuin took a slight breath, adjusting his breathing and thoughts, to completely calm himself down. Drawing his wand and aiming it at himself, Anjuin steadily and accurately cast the silencing charm that he had tested many times. Ah! Anjuin shouted a few times to confirm that he couldn't hear any sound, and then began the infrasonic charm experiment. He lightly waved his wand, and the runes of the spell condensed at the tip of the wand. With a slight flick of his wrist, a wave of magical power spread out from the tip of the wand, but Anjuin didn't hear any sound at this time, and there was no reaction on his body. This even made Anjuin wonder if the spell had been cast successfully. He waved his wand again, and Anjuin extinguished the spell. To confirm, he looked at the rat in the cage next to him, and sure enough, it had died with blood flowing from all 7 orifices. It seems to be successful, and the silencing charm is very effective. Anjuin said to himself excitedly, but then realized that he hadn't made any sound. Only then did he realize that the effect of the silencing charm hadn't ended. Seeing the condition of the experimental subject and confirming that the infrasonic charm had indeed worked, Anjuin became bolder and decided to continue testing the effect of the infrasonic charm. But at this moment, Hagrid ran towards him and tried to say something to him. Anjuin couldn't hear any sound at this time, so he had to quickly release the sonic repulsion charm on his body. "What's wrong, Hagrid? I cast a spell on myself just now and couldn't hear you." Anjuin could finally hear his own voice at this time. "I wanted to say, I have to leave for a while. Dumbledore suddenly notified me and told me to go find him quickly." Seeing that Anjuin finally responded, Hagrid quickly finished speaking, and then, carrying his little red umbrella, hurried towards the castle. Anjuin looked at Hagrid's hurried appearance and didn't know what had happened. He shook his head and decided not to worry about it. Anyway, after testing, this sonic repulsion charm was very useful, so he decided to continue the experiment. What he didn't know was that tonight, an event that would change the entire British wizarding world had occurred. At this time, Anjuin was still happily testing his spell. It seems that the effect of the infrasonic charm will decay with distance. It will cause a very strong interference effect within 10 meters. After more than 10 meters, the rat will not die. Will it only be subject to some interference at a greater distance? Anjuin excitedly recorded the experimental data in his notebook. After testing, the infrasonic charm would cause a strong kill within 5 meters, and the interference ability was also the strongest. The killing effect would be weaker from 5 meters to about 10 meters, and the interference effect was still good. After that, the farther the distance, the worse the effect. Anjuin looked at the little rat 30 meters away, which was now only squeaking and running around nervously in its cage under the influence of the infrasonic charm. Humans are more resistant to sound waves. It seems that after more than 10 meters, the interference to humans will decrease even more. Anjuin kept summarizing. After completing the experiment he had been thinking about, Anjuin stretched contentedly. It was already close to midnight, and Hagrid had also been gone for a while. He didn't know what that guy was busy with. Without thinking too much, he was very satisfied with tonight's experiment, as satisfied as if he had solved an advanced math problem that all the students in the class couldn't solve. He lay on the bed in a happy mood and slept soundly. And shocking news appeared the next day. The next morning was a weekend. Anjuin and Charles, full of energy after their morning exercise, came to the castle hall, but at this time they found that the atmosphere in the hall was different from usual. Almost all the little wizards were not eating, but were discussing something enthusiastically. The sky was also full of owls, constantly delivering letters and newspapers to the little wizards. Anjuin, Anjuin, come here. Vivian found Anjuin and shouted at him. What happened? Why is everyone so excited? Anjuin asked in confusion. Oh my god, haven't you heard yet? Vivian also said with a shocked expression at this time, the Dark Lord has fallen. It is said that he was killed by a boy who survived. The Daily Prophet announced the news early this morning, and my family also sent a letter to confirm it. What? Anjuin was taken aback and snatched the newspaper from Vivian's hand. Chapter 100. The Daily Prophet Urgent News. A horrifying murder occurred in Godric's Hollow last night. According to sources, the Dark Lord broke into the Potter's home on the night of October 31st and brutally murdered the young couple, James and Lily. He then attempted to murder their infant child. However, when he attacked their child, Harry Potter, the killing curse failed for unknown reasons. According to senior aura analysis, the Dark Lord was suspected of being harmed by his own killing curse and has perished. The boy who survived the killing curse has been taken into protection by Hogwarts headmaster Dumbledore. The front page of the Daily Prophet clearly depicts last night's tragedy, with headlines in large font such as Godric's Hollow Incident, The Fall of the Dark Lord, and The Boy Who Lived. Anjuin's heart sank. He hadn't expected the tragedy he had been avoiding to still occur. But he couldn't understand. Weren't Lily and her family under Dumbledore's protection? And what about Sirius? Wasn't he responsible for protecting Lily's family? How could such a tragedy still happen? Anjuin continued to browse the Daily Prophet, trying to find answers. On the second page, Anjuin saw news about Sirius, but it was bad news. The newspaper reported that Sirius Black had used a spell to blow up an entire street in a Muggle neighborhood, killing Peter Pettigrew and 12 Muggles. He was arrested by the hit wizards who arrived at the scene. The reason he did this was because Sirius had betrayed the Potters, directly causing the Godric's Hollow incident. That's impossible. Anjuin stared at the report in the newspaper, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, he was stunned. Vivian, who was next to him, was startled by his loud shout. The young wizards around them, after confirming the news of the Dark Lord's fall, all celebrated excitedly. Some threw their wizard hats into the air, some launched fireworks into the hall, and some even jumped onto the tables, shouting loudly. This included many Slytherin students beside Anjuin, with only those pure-blood wizards staring at the newspaper with an expression of disbelief. At this moment, the excitement and joy from last night had long gone from Anjuin's face, replaced with suspicion, panic, and anger. With a swoosh, Anjuin stood up from his seat, grabbed the newspaper, and ran out of the hall. Vivian looked at him rushing away, confused. Bang, 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 Anjuin frantically knocked on the door outside Professor McGonagall's office. Professor McGonagall was also a member of the Order of the Phoenix, he should know what exactly happened. But Anjuin waited for a long time, and there was no movement inside. It seemed that Professor McGonagall was not in. So Anjuin turned and hurried to Professor Bones's office. Professor Bones opened the office door and saw Anjuin panting, clutching a newspaper tightly in his hand. He immediately understood what had happened. He himself was shocked by what happened last night. Is what's written here true, Professor? Anjuin stared at Professor Bones, unfolding the Daily Prophet in his hand. Yes, Dumbledore knew about all of this last night. He and Professor McGonagall have already left Hogwarts. He arranged for me to stay at Hogwarts to take care of the students, Professor Bones said in a deep voice. Then Anjuin turned to another page of the newspaper. Is this also true? Sirius, Did he really betray the Potters? Alas! Professor Bones sighed. I know you and Sirius are very close, but unfortunately, according to the information we have at the moment, Sirius did indeed. That's impossible! Anjuin shouted hoarsely. I understand him, and I know his feelings for the Potters. There must be something wrong. Calm down, Anjuin. Professor Bones pulled Anjuin into the room and made him sit down. Facts speak louder than words. I don't want to believe that such a thing would happen either, but... is there any evidence? Even if he killed Peter Pettigrew, maybe there's some hidden reason. Anjuin still couldn't accept this fact. Lily, his friend who he always thought was safe, couldn't escape her fate, and another one of his friends was one of the accomplices. Alas, now I should tell you the truth, Professor Bones pondered slightly. I know you once suggested to Dumbledore that Lily's family should be well protected, but do you know what method they used to protect Lily's family? Anjuin frowned, looking at Professor Bones, confused. Lily's family has never actually left their original residence, but the Dark Lord and the Death Eaters have never been able to find them. Do you know why? Bones reminded Anjuin. They never left, but they couldn't be found, are you saying? After thinking for a while, Anjuin thought of something. The Fidelius charm? So that's how it is, so the memory of their home address suddenly disappeared. Professor Bones nodded. He knew that Anjuin had a wealth of knowledge and would understand immediately. So you know why we're so sure, right? Are you saying that Sirius is Lily and James's secret keeper? Anjuin asked. Yes, haven't you noticed that Sirius disappeared after the Potters were hidden? Bones reminded him. At first, we thought he was hiding to avoid the Death Eaters, but the truth may not be so. Is it possible that the Death Eaters found and captured him, and he revealed Lily's location after being tortured? Anjuin really couldn't accept this result. If that's the case, where would he have gotten the energy to go and attack Peter? Bones said seriously. And you may not understand the Fidelius charm well enough. Unless the secret keeper actively reveals the secret, even the Imperious Curse or Veritaserum can't pry it out of his mouth. Then that's the truth, that's the truth. Anjuin stared blankly at the newspaper in front of him, unable to believe it, but Professor Bones ruthlessly shattered his fantasy. Alas! Professor Bones knew that Anjuin had a deep friendship with the Potters and Sirius, and now he didn't know how to comfort him. Anjuin didn't know how he returned to the cabin in the Forbidden Forest. He was still reeling from the news he had just received. He, who didn't remember the plot development very well, didn't know if everything that happened today was the same as in the original plot. But when he was really in it, he found that he couldn't look at these living people with a third-person perspective. Lily, who was always kind and gentle and had helped him a lot, and Sirius, who was free and unrestrained and loved to show off, had all formed a deep bond with Anjuin. Chapter 101. Hagrid hadn't returned since last night, and Anjuin stood alone in front of the hut, blankly staring at the distant Forbidden Forest. For some reason, Anjuin felt an inexplicable fire boiling in his chest. Red. Accompanied by this nameless fire, unsure how to vent it, the magic within him surged uncontrollably. All the surrounding objects floated into the air, giant pumpkins, wooden barrels, all circling around him in accordance with Anjuin's confused thoughts. Suddenly, as if a shackle had been broken, another change was added to the magical power around Anjuin, and the objects floating in the air seemed to be held tightly in the air as if gripped by invisible giant hands. Ah! Anjuin roared, venting his anger, and the objects floating in the air, as if being squeezed by a huge force, were all crushed to pieces. As everything around him was crushed, the sky seemed to understand the pain in Anjuin's heart, and a drizzle began to fall. Feeling the coldness of the raindrops, Anjuin seemed to wake up, and then he found that there was nothing good left within 10 meters of him. The large wooden bucket for holding water, a section of wooden fence, and the fruits and vegetables in the vegetable garden were all crushed to pieces. At this moment, Anjuin subconsciously stretched out his right hand, and in the void a few meters in front of him, a transparent large hand appeared in the rain. He reached out and grasped and waved it, and the transparent hand in front of him responded to Anjuin's movements. This is my impediment jinx. Anjuin realized at this moment that due to the violent fluctuations of his emotions, the impediment jinx, which had already reached the instinct level, had also broken through. Now it's become a real mage hand. Anjuin looked at the impediment jinx that had broken through to extraordinary. Perhaps it can't be simply called an impediment jinx now, but at this time he was not happy at all, just standing in the rain blankly. Gradually calming down, Anjuin could still hear the faint laughter coming from the direction of Hogwarts Castle, accompanied by the fireworks being launched and the people excitedly riding their brooms into the air to celebrate. He lowered his head and silently cleaned up the mess he had made. The scene of laughter and peace at Hogwarts formed a sharp contrast with the lonely Anjuin. After a night that was difficult for everyone to calm down, in the early morning, Anjuin heard the rumbling engine of a motorcycle. Hearing the sound, Anjuin quickly put on his clothes and came outside the hut, just in time to see Hagrid riding a motorcycle landing in front of the hut. "Hagrid, where have you been these past 2 days? And what's this? How did Sirius's motorcycle end up with you?" Although the motorcycle didn't have a sidecar, Anjuin recognized it immediately. It was Sirius's motorcycle. Hagrid took off the goggles on his face, got out of the car, and looked at Anjuin with a dim expression, sniffing his nose. "I don't know if you've heard, James and Lily. Yet." Anjuin also looked dejected, but then raised his head. "What's going on with this car? I heard Professor Bones say that Sirius betrayed Lily and James. How did his car get to you? This has to start from the night before yesterday." Hagrid pulled Anjuin back into the hut, picked up a copper cup and took a big gulp of water. "That night I received a notice from Dumbledore. He asked me to go to Godric's Hollow to find James and Lily's child, Harry. So, when I was doing rune experiments that day, they were." Anjuin was stunned. "That's right." Hagrid sighed. "As soon as I got there, I saw the bodies of James and Lily in the house. James fell in the front hall, and Lily was lying alone next to little Harry." Speaking of this, Hagrid's tears couldn't stop flowing out again, so he had to pull out his handkerchief and desperately blow his nose, and said in a slightly choked voice, "The poor Potter couple were lying there alone, but Dumbledore ordered me to protect Harry and send him back to Little Whinging safely." After blowing his nose vigorously again, Hagrid continued, "But when I came out of the Potter's house, I ran into Sirius. Damn it, I almost believed him at the time. He told me to hand Harry over to him, but I didn't agree." "You met Sirius?" Anjuin was a little surprised. "And he wanted to take Potter away? Then what about that motorcycle?" "He knew that I was there on Dumbledore's orders, so he gave me his motorcycle, and then I left. It took me a whole day to get to the agreed place, and then Dumbledore put Harry at his relative's door, poor Harry." Hagrid couldn't help it anymore, like a sad little girl, tears streaming down his face. Anjuin listened to Hagrid's story, and while his mood was heavy, he also had some different guesses about what happened that night. Why did Sirius go to the Potter's house after Voldemort attacked the Potters? If he had really betrayed them, why didn't he attack Hagrid, but instead let Hagrid leave safely, and even gave Hagrid his beloved motorcycle? "Hagrid, has Headmaster Dumbledore returned?" Anjuin felt clueless and just wanted to ask Dumbledore in person now. "He should be back. I rode back, which took a whole night. Theoretically, he should be faster than me," Hagrid said, choking. "Okay, Hagrid, you rest for a while. I have something to go to Headmaster Dumbledore for." Anjuin comforted Hagrid for a while, then got up, changed his clothes, and walked towards the castle. At this time, in Dumbledore's office, another person was questioning Dumbledore. "You guaranteed that he would be safe?" Snape shouted hysterically at Dumbledore. "Lily and James trusted the wrong person, Severus." Dumbledore also had a heavy expression at this time. "Just like you, but the child is still alive. He doesn't need protection, the Dark Lord has disappeared," Snape said dejectedly. "The Dark Lord will return, and then that child will be in danger." Dumbledore stared at the frustrated Snape and added, "His eyes are very much like his mother's, if you really love her." Dumbledore's words made Snape's heart twitch. He raised his head and stared at Dumbledore. "No one can know. Come to Hogwarts and help me, Snape, I will help you resolve the Ministry of Magic's accusations," Dumbledore said. Snape nodded silently, took a deep breath, gently wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, and walked towards the office door. After walking down the spiral staircase, Snape had returned to a cold expression. Chapter 102. Snape was still finding it hard to calm the complex emotions in his heart, numbly walking step by step along the corridor, but just as he reached the stairs near the 8th floor, someone turned up from downstairs. "Reading." Snape instinctively looked up and saw a boy wearing Slytherin robes, with shoulder-length black hair, a monocle on his right eye, delicate features, a pair of sword-like eyebrows, and black eyes that were now wide open, staring at him. What was this new look? And the boy in front of him looked a little familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. The young wizard in front of him also froze for a moment after seeing his face clearly, then quickly took out his wand and raised his hand, casting a quick and ruthless impediment jinx. Although Snape felt inexplicable at the moment, his reaction was still very fast. The wand appeared in his hand with a backhand, and he raised his hand to deflect the spell. However, the young man's offensive was continuous, with impediment jinxes, petrification jinxes, disarming jinxes, and stunners all firing at him like a machine gun. At this time, Snape was attacked by the inexplicably appearing little wizard, and his heart was also ignited. While constantly using Protego to defend, he also fired several dark curses. However, the young man's skills were extremely good, and he used his nimble steps to dodge the attacks in a flash of lightning. The dark curses that were difficult to avoid were also deflected by impediment jinxes that formed shields. For a time, spells flew around, and rebounded or missed spells landed on the walls and the ground, exploding with violent noises, and pieces of gravel were blasted from the stone walls and the ground. At this time, Snape didn't expect the little wizard in front of him to be so difficult to deal with, and he couldn't help but slightly increase the power of his spells. Several spells, after shattering the opponent's spells, still struck towards the boy with unabated force. The young man in front of him also showed extremely strong control, constantly waving his wand, stirring up the gravel on the ground, and adding rapidly flowing air, creating a magical storm in front of him, diverting the powerful spells that were shot at him. Some of the spells even circled around the little wizard before counterattacking him. At this moment, the boy took advantage of the gap to gather strength and vigorously threw a left fist at Snape. The moment Snape saw the little wizard make a move, he felt a huge pressure. His perception told him that there was a giant fist condensed with magic in the air attacking him. In desperation, he mobilized all the magic in his body and waved it down with all his might. A crescent-shaped sharp spell split the giant fist in front of him, but it also triggered a violent magical explosion, and the resulting shockwave overturned Snape and the little wizard together. After falling to the ground, Snape only felt pain all over his body, but he still struggled to stand up, but he found that the little wizard on the opposite side reacted faster. After falling to the ground, he immediately touched the ground with his back, and then instantly exerted force. A carp jumped up, using a posture that Snape had never seen before, and jumped up with a tang, and then ruthlessly shot a spell at him. At this time, Snape was struggling to stand up, and the spell shot straight at him did not give him time to react at all. Seeing that the spell was about to reach his eyes, he was secretly cursing his bad luck in his heart. What the hell was going on? He inexplicably fought with a student, and it looked like he was about to capsize in the gutter. However, just as he was about to be stunned by this attacking spell, a figure stood in front of him to block the spell for him. It was Dumbledore. Dumbledore was originally in his office, but suddenly heard bursts of explosions coming from downstairs, so he quickly came to check. As a result, he saw such a scene as soon as he arrived. If he had arrived a step later, Snape would have suffered. "Anjuin, what are you doing?" After Dumbledore blocked the spell for Snape, he glanced at Snape, and then stared at Anjuin and asked. At this time, standing opposite Snape and Dumbledore was Anjuin. He was originally here to find Dumbledore, but after going up to the 8th floor, he happened to find a person walking in the corridor. After carefully identifying him, Anjuin found that this was Snape, whom he had seen in Sirius's photo album. Suddenly encountering a Death Eater, Anjuin was not in a good mood, so naturally he raised his hand and started fighting. After experiencing a battle and desperately striking an impediment fist, Anjuin was also exhausted at this time, but he still pointed his wand at Snape and shouted angrily, "Headmaster, I recognize this person, he is a Death Eater." As soon as Snape heard Anjuin's words, his face darkened, and he got up and snorted coldly. "It seems that there was a little misunderstanding between you just now." Dumbledore looked at the almost ruined corridor and smiled slightly. "Misunderstanding? Headmaster, I don't understand what you mean." Anjuin still didn't put down his wand. "Don't be excited, Anjuin, Snape is one of us, I can vouch for him." Seeing that Anjuin was still staring at Snape, Dumbledore quickly persuaded him. "Are you sure?" Anjuin heard Dumbledore say this, but based on his trust in the headmaster, he slowly put away his wand at this time and frowned as he stepped forward. "We have all experienced a lot in the past 2 days, and it seems that you have too, Anjuin." Dumbledore could see that Anjuin was in the wrong state, and turned to look at Snape. "I'm sorry, Snape, you experienced this as soon as you returned to school." "Humph, it seems that Hogwarts is not very welcome to me, maybe I should reconsider what you said. Snape said coldly with a straight face. This is also the charming part of Hogwarts, you will always find surprises here, you will like it here again. Dumbledore ignored Snape's angry words. Anjuin, although this is just a misunderstanding, I think you should give Professor Snape, who was frightened, an apology. Professor? Anjuin seemed to hear a special title, but he honestly said to Snape, I'm sorry, Professor Snape, I was reckless. If you mean that the surprise is being attacked. Snape glanced at Dumbledore, and then glared at Anjuin fiercely, I remember you, you reckless kid. After snorting coldly again, Snape brushed past and left here. It seems you're very angry today, Anjuin. Dumbledore pointed to the ruined corridor around him. I'm sorry, Headmaster, it's all my fault. Anjuin frowned, glanced at Snape who was leaving, and turned to apologize to Dumbledore. Dumbledore shook his head slightly. Anjuin was not the one who was emotionally agitated these 2 days. After thinking about it, he took out his wand and waved it gently. All the fragments of the dilapidated corridor flew into the air and seamlessly stuck back to their original positions, and everything around returned to its original state. Chapter 103. Let's go. If I'm not mistaken, you originally came to find me, didn't you? Dumbledore said slowly. Yes, Professor, there are many troubling questions I can't find answers to, so, Anjuin sighed. Dumbledore led Anjuin back to the headmaster's office, and seeing Anjuin's low mood, he took the initiative to say, I didn't expect such a thing to happen either. It all stems from my negligence. Ask whatever questions you have now. Anjuin deliberated for a moment, then looked up at Dumbledore. How is Sirius now? What are the results of your interrogation of him? As expected, Dumbledore had guessed that he would ask this question when he saw Anjuin rushing to find him early in the morning. What I can say is that Sirius did not offer any defense for his actions after being arrested and has now been sent to Azkaban. But that's not reasonable. Has Sirius been pretending all along? Anjuin was still puzzled. Yes, this world is full of unreasonableness. Often, reality is more magical than the stories in books. No one can know what made Sirius become like this. We trusted someone we shouldn't have trusted. Although it's painful, it's also a fact. I'm sorry, Anjuin, for telling you such a cold, hard truth. Dumbledore also sighed at this point. Since even you are so sure, then it really is the truth. Although Anjuin still couldn't believe it, he could only accept it now. Can I see him? I want to hear him say it himself. Anjuin thought for a moment and tried to persuade him. I'm sorry, he is now in the safest and most dangerous place in the wizarding world. It's not a place anyone can go. Dumbledore looked at Anjuin, feeling that he couldn't be so ruthless. The only people who can go to Azkaban are the Aurors stationed there, high-ranking ministry officials, members of the Wizengamot, and some people with prestige. Maybe if you work hard, you might have a chance to ask him for the answer yourself in the future. Anjuin knew that Dumbledore was trying to comfort and encourage him in a roundabout way, so he had to nod and say, I understand, Headmaster. Always look forward. Dumbledore considered slightly, you are also good friends with the Potter couple. I think you would also want to attend their funeral, to see them off personally. Funeral? We've attended enough funerals this year. Anjuin couldn't help but recall what happened during the summer vacation, and suddenly remembered something, asking, by the way, how is Harry? Is he safe now? Rest assured, we have placed him in an absolutely safe place. Lily cast a powerful protective magic on Harry before she sacrificed herself, which allowed him to survive the Dark Lord's attack. I have strengthened that power, and now no one can find him. In Dumbledore's eyes, Anjuin was a child with a firm will and a sense of justice. His behavior during the summer vacation was worthy of Dumbledore's trust, so he revealed some things to him. Then, what about that Snape, Professor? Anjuin remembered that the last time he saw Snape was before entering Hogwarts, and Anjuin was almost hit by his Sectum Sempra curse. As for him, all you need to know is that he hates the Dark Lord as much as we do. In fact, we have always been grateful to Severus for providing us with information. Now that the Dark Lord has fallen, his identity has been truly revealed. Dumbledore said, picking and choosing what he could say. Oh? So you were so sure that the attack would happen during last year's Christmas holiday because... That's right, so I said Snape is trustworthy. You will have to be with him day and night for a long time in the future, so try to maintain a good relationship with him. Anjuin didn't understand what the headmaster meant by being with him day and night, but what came to his mind was information about this Snape. So that's how it is. When the Potter family was attacked last time, Headmaster Dumbledore said he had obtained information from other channels. Was it him? Anjuin had indeed suspected that Dumbledore had an inside man among the Death Eaters. Anjuin solved a lot of doubts before nodding reassuringly. I understand, Headmaster. I'm sorry for causing you so much trouble. Dumbledore shook his head and said, I don't think anyone would blame a kind-hearted child like you. I will have Hagrid notify you before the funeral is held, and don't forget to attend tonight's dinner. I know you haven't eaten dinner in the hall for a while. There is an important announcement tonight. Anjuin walked out of the headmaster's office, digesting the large amount of information he had gained in the past 2 days. Although he had long felt that Lily and her family would not be absolutely safe just because of Dumbledore's protection, he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Sirius's betrayal shocked him even more. He didn't understand what had changed Sirius's position, or whether he had really changed his position. He took out a magical photo from his arms. It was taken at the Potter's house last Christmas. Looking at the happy families on it, and Sirius with a smug look on his face, Anjuin couldn't help but frown again. Can Dumbledore's words really be completely trusted? Did Sirius really betray his beliefs? This may be related to what happened during the half-year he disappeared. Then let me find out what exactly happened. Perhaps Anjuin wanted to give himself an explanation, or perhaps he wanted to find a goal for himself, he said to himself. Although he had a skeptical attitude towards all these things and words, he didn't show it. He would bury these doubts in his heart and then find the answers himself. With a feeling of doubt and speculation, Anjuin went straight to class. Anjuin was absent-minded in class that day, but the professors who taught the classes did not criticize him, because the other little wizards were even more mischievous. After learning that the Dark Lord had fallen and disappeared, almost all the little wizards had entered a carnival mode. The classrooms were full of noise, and the professors were in a good mood, so they let these excited children go. In the evening, Anjuin followed Dumbledore's advice and attended the dinner that night, and then he heard shocking news. What? That Snape will take over Professor Slughorn as the new potions professor? And will also serve as the head of Slytherin House. Anjuin was stunned when he heard Dumbledore's announcement. Chapter 104. At this moment, Professor Slughorn was giving a farewell speech on the stage in the Great Hall. It was obvious that he was quite happy with this arrangement. As he was about to officially retire, he bid farewell to all the students with a smile. The young wizards present also gave the professor a definite and warm applause. As far as teaching is concerned, Professor Slughorn was still very popular. After all, he was a good old man, and except for a little vanity, he always treated people with a kind and elder-like attitude. At this time, Snape, who was sitting in the teacher's seat, kept squinting at Anjuin, almost making him feel bristly all over. He could only lower his head and secretly curse his bad luck. It seemed that he would have a hard time in the future. Hey, Anjuin, do you know that new headmaster? He seems to like you very much, he keeps staring at you. Vivian craned her neck to look at Snape and said to Anjuin. Hee. Anjuin glanced at Snape again and found that he was still staring at him intently. I'd rather not be liked so much. Where have you been these past 2 days? You don't know how lively it has been these past 2 days. All the students are having a carnival, and even the food has become much richer. Vivian said happily. I don't have that much good mood. By the way, how have those pure blood guys been recently? Anjuin was a little curious about those guys. Without a leader, what else could they stir up? What else can they do? Vivian turned her head and glanced in the direction of the upper grades. Those guys were still crestfallen at the beginning, but yesterday that Rolly Yaxley jumped out again and announced that the Dark Lord was not actually dead, and that he would continue to defend the dignity of the pure blood families or something. In a sense, he's right. Although Anjuin didn't know the plot of the original book, he could also guess that Voldemort wouldn't just die so simply. They had another big fight with Vanessa, but it's been much quieter recently. Why don't you go back to the common room to live? Isn't it boring to stay outside alone every day? And you don't know any of the school news? Vivian said. Vivian knew that many Slytherin purebloods didn't like Anjuin, and often used foul language to talk about him behind his back, and always wanted to make trouble for him, but Anjuin didn't give them any chance. He hadn't stayed in the common room for a long time. Those people couldn't even see Anjuin once a day, but the situation seemed to have changed recently. Let's observe a little more. Some people don't do evil for any reason, they just do evil for the sake of doing evil, and they will always find some excuses for their behavior. Anjuan said noncommittally. The banquet ended in peace and joy, at least for most people. And Anjuan's mood was not so beautiful the next day, because the first class this morning was potions class taught by the new headmaster Snape. At this time, Anjuan and Vivian were sitting together in front of the operating table, quietly waiting for class to begin. Soon a black figure appeared in front of them, a black robe, black hair, black eyes. Snape had a straight face, like a silent bat, flashed past in front of everyone, hugged his chest with both hands, coldly scanned the people under the stage, and then focused his gaze on Anjuan. I don't know how you have learned in your previous potions classes, and I don't want to know. Although Professor Slughorn has rich potions knowledge and teaching experience, he is always too kind and always tolerates some stupid guys who keep making the same mistakes. Snape looked around with a cold face, and then said word by word. Making potions is a profound science, a precise craft. For those few, and those who are truly interested, I can teach you how to confuse the mind, confuse the senses. I will teach you to win fame, brew glory, and even let you escape death. Speaking of which, Snape glanced at Anjuan again. Perhaps some people think they already have extraordinary abilities and are confident enough in themselves. Mr. Wilson. Snape walked up to Anjuan. Here it comes, Anjuan thought helplessly, but had to bite the bullet and stand up. Professor. What do you get if I add powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Snape asked coldly. You get a powerful sleeping draught, the draught of living death, also called the living death potion. Snape's face remained unchanged, and he said again, if I want to make a draught of euphoria, how should I process the main ingredients? A cauldron of draught of euphoria requires 2 mandrake fruits, 1 whole without peeling, and 1 peeled and sliced. Then if I have a contaminated dragon blood, what potion do you think it can be made into? Anjuan frowned. This question was seriously beyond the syllabus. Okay, but he still bit the bullet and answered, as far as I know, contaminated dragon blood can be used as the main ingredient of mad dragon blood potion, but that potion may drive people crazy. Maybe you just need to answer the question directly, you don't need to make such unnecessary reminders. Snape still stared at Anjuan gloomily. It seems that some people do have the capital to be arrogant. Anjuan didn't respond to Snape's words and sat down calmly. What are you waiting for? Why don't you write all this down? Snape returned to the podium, crossed his hands, and said loudly. Snape's aura instantly shocked everyone, and for a while, there was a rustling sound of writing in the classroom. Oh my god, I thought Snape liked you before, what did you do to him? It feels like he wants to bite you to death. Vivian tilted her head and whispered. Anjuan shook his head slightly. If he was always targeted by this professor, he couldn't stand it. He had to think about what to do. Should he admit his mistake first? Surface work is sometimes necessary. The potions class continued in this oppressive atmosphere. Snape was guiding everyone to prepare the swelling solution. This potion can cause the parts of the body that come into contact with the potion to swell. Prepare the pufferfish eyes, and then put them in one by one after I stir the potion in the cauldron 3 times. Anjuan calmly instructed Vivian. At this moment, a figure silently swayed behind the two of them, and contemptuously commented, Are you so sure that the time you put in the ingredients is accurate, Mr. Wilson? Maybe you should confirm it again. Vivian was startled by the sudden sound behind her, and the material clamped by the tweezers was almost dropped, but Anjuan calmly replied, Yes, Professor, I am very sure, it's now, Vivian. Chapter 105. Vivian, who was beside him, habitually obeyed the order and added the materials to the crucible, and then saw the slightly boiling potion instantly calm down, and the color also changed from a strange dark blue to light green. Humph! Snape saw that Anjuan's mind was so firm, and didn't say anything more. Instead, he turned and walked to the operating table next to him. You two idiots, don't keep stirring endlessly, do you want to turn yourselves into pig heads? Vivian patted her chest and stuck out her tongue. She was almost fooled by Snape just now, and thought there was something wrong with their operation. Once Anjuan entered a working state, he was like an emotionless machine, deaf to the interference around him. He was the first to complete the swelling solution, but this only earned him an ordinary evaluation from Snape. Finally, this torturous potions class ended, and all the students ran out of the classroom as if they were escaping, even the Slytherin students. However, Anjuin calmly stayed where he was. He felt that he had to talk to Snape to clear things up, otherwise he couldn't stand being targeted all the time. Snape saw Anjuin, who hadn't left the classroom, and smiled contemptuously. "What's wrong, Mr. Wilson, why haven't you left? Are you planning to attack me again?" Anjuin listened to Snape's harsh mockery, calmed his mind, and said calmly, "I'm sorry, Professor Snape. I stayed behind to apologize to you again for what happened yesterday. I was very emotional yesterday, and I didn't know your true identity. I didn't mean to disrespect you." "Humph, you don't need to say these high-sounding words. I remember you. You were the one who saved Sirius's life back then. As his friend, I'm not surprised that you react this way when you see me. People who have been contaminated by that kind of idiot are naturally not very bright." Anjuin's eyes narrowed slightly. Is this professor usually so sarcastic? Why did he turn the topic to Sirius? Thinking of Sirius, he felt a burst of irritability in his heart. "I'm also good friends with Lily. Maybe I'm even more infected by her. Are you going to blame Lily too?" "I don't even know if you know her," Anjuin retorted unceremoniously. As soon as Snape heard this, he rushed excitedly to Anjuin and said word by word, "Mr. Wilson, please be careful when you speak to the professor." "Is it necessary to be so excited?" Anjuin felt inexplicable, but still said calmly, "Sorry, Professor, I don't know why you have such great hostility towards me. If it's because of my offense yesterday, I apologize to you, but if it's because of something else that you don't like, then I can only express my regret." "Humph, arrogant boy, but I don't think you're hopeless. Let me remind you," Snape's face gradually calmed down. "Let me ask you, why didn't I see you when I was patrolling and speaking in the Slytherin common room yesterday? Maybe you never considered yourself a member of Slytherin. So that's why Snape said he was arrogant." Anjuin had to explain, "The reason why I don't live in the Slytherin common room is for my own safety. You should know that I'm a Muggle wizard. Don't make excuses. The Dark Lord has already fallen, and I remember you're quite good at fighting," Snape teased. "I, as the head of Slytherin, order you to move back to the Slytherin dormitory. I will patrol there again today. I hope you don't disappoint me." "I understand," Anjuin frowned and had to agree. After coming out of the potions classroom, Anjuin thought about how to deal with this head of house with a bad temper in the future. As for moving back to the dormitory, he didn't really care. Now he had accumulated a lot of trump cards and wasn't particularly afraid of those aggressive pure-blood wizards. After making up his mind, Anjuin didn't delay and prepared to move back to the Slytherin dormitory now. After arriving at the common room, he found that there had been some interesting changes here compared to before. A hand-washed mahjong table was actually openly placed in the common room hall. At this time, several female students were playing mahjong with great interest, and many people were watching around. Good, mahjong is flourishing in Slytherin. Many of the new students felt very strange when they saw a stranger coming in from outside, but Anjuin was wearing a Slytherin robe, which couldn't help but attract everyone to gossip and inquire about this stranger. And when the pure-blood wizards such as Sampule Traverse saw Anjuin suddenly appear, they couldn't help but reveal hateful expressions. Even a fool would know who had attacked them in the Hogwarts main tower. Traverse was the most angry, because his wallet had been stolen for 2 consecutive years, which was simply a great shame. They didn't dare to openly attack in the common room, but Traverse couldn't bear it and stepped forward to mock, "Yo, isn't this our famous Slytherin ghost? Are you willing to come back to Slytherin? Maybe the Sorting Hat made a mistake and shouldn't have sorted you, this disgusting guy, into Slytherin." "I still agree with some of your views," Anjuin sneered. "Slytherin students are always shrewd and have a sense of honor, but there are always idiots like you who keep lowering the lower limit of the house. You don't reflect on yourself and still have the face to spout nonsense here. You." Traverse's face turned red instantly when he heard Anjuin's mockery. He was about to step forward and explode, but was held back by Rozier and others next to him, and could only shout hysterically, "Let go of me, I'm going to let this mudblood know how powerful it is to underestimate me." The commotion in the common room attracted everyone's attention, and even the girls who were playing mahjong turned their heads to look at Anjuin and Traverse. However, someone interrupted the conflict between the two sides. "Enough, Traverse, don't embarrass yourself here," a senior with short light brown hair pulled Traverse back. Anjuin recognized this guy. It was Quirk Wilkes, a 4th-year student. He remembered that a guy named Wilkes seemed to have died in the battle at the Potter's house last Christmas. He seemed to be this guy's uncle, and he was also a pure-blood supremacist. However, at this time, after Quirk Wilkes pulled Traverse back, he smiled slightly at Anduin, revealing an expression that he thought was very kind, and said, "We are all members of Slytherin, there is no need to be so aggressive, is there, Anduin?" Chapter 106. Oh. Anduin readjusted his monocle. Sounds like I'm the one actively causing trouble. Don't wrongly accuse an innocent person. Read. Sample is the heir to the Traverse family. I don't think anyone wants to provoke him. Wilkes glanced at Anduin smugly. Sometimes, having one more friend is more valuable than having one more enemy, don't you think? Then what do you want? Anduin raised an eyebrow, looking at Wilkes with a teasing smile. I know you. As a top student in the second year, you are favored by many professors. We are willing to extend an olive branch to you. As long as you are willing to support me, we can stop pursuing your Muggle wizard status. As for Traverse, Wilkes tilted his head to look at Sample, who was furious beside him. I can take the lead and have him forgive your disrespect. I think this is a win-win situation. You know how to choose. What? Forgive this filthy mudblood? Why? Before Anduin could speak, Traverse, who was next to him, shouted angrily at Wilkes. All right, Sample, this is not a place for nonsense. You should also learn to contribute to the glory of Slytherin and pure-blood families. Wilkes turned his head and glared at Traverse, then looked back at Anduin. You are a smart person, you know the principle of climbing higher. Anduin looked at Wilkes's clumsy performance and couldn't help but curl his lips. These guys are really good at putting hats on themselves, as if they represent Slytherin. Stop pursuing my Muggle status? Forgive me? Should I lower my head and call you master? Anduin approached Wilkes, and said with a sneer, word by word, sorry, senior, I'm not used to wagging my tail at guys who are dogs for others. I think what you should do now is tuck your tails between your legs. After all, dogs without owners don't have a good life. Be careful not to follow in your uncle's footsteps. You. Wilkes heard Anduin's half-mocking, half-threatening words, his face flushed with anger, staring at Anduin's eyes, no longer pretending to be a gentleman as before. At this moment, Snape, who had just entered the Slytherin common room and was preparing to inspect, saw this scene. Snape frowned and said coldly in a ghostly voice, "What are you doing?" The people who were gathered together at this time saw the Dean coming and collectively greeted Snape, "Hello, Dean." "Anduin, you answer me, what exactly happened?" Snape saw Anduin surrounded by a group of guys and helped him out. At this time, Traverse and Wilkes frowned and looked at each other, secretly complaining. If this guy complains to the Dean, he will inevitably be scolded. "It's nothing, Dean." Anduin curled his lips and smiled slightly. "They haven't seen me in the common room for a while, and they are communicating their feelings with me. Wilkes also told me that he misses his uncle and wants to go play with him." "Uncle?" Snape glanced at Wilkes. He remembered that his uncle had just died last year. This guy's mouth is so mean. However, Snape didn't think too much, and looked at Wilkes and asked, "Is that so, Wilkes?" Wilkes cursed Anduin for being vicious in his heart, saying that he wanted to see his uncle. Wasn't that the same as saying he wanted him to die? But he still honestly replied, That's right, we are communicating our feelings." Snape narrowed his eyes slightly when he saw this, glanced at Anduin again, and said, "Come out with me." "Yes, Dean." Anduin glanced at the crowd in place and followed Professor Snape out of the common room. Snape led Anduin to his office in the basement, turned and stared at Anduin mockingly, "Humph, really amazing, unafraid of power, overcoming the strong with the weak. Do you think you are very capable? Provoking those guys, can it satisfy your vanity? Or do you think this is very interesting? Power." Anduin smiled mockingly. "I don't think those guys represent any power, and you also saw that I didn't provoke them on my own initiative. You can't expect me to shrink my head into the ground when someone points a finger at my nose, right?" Anduin emphasized again, "You asked me to live in Slytherin. I was doing well outside, and I wouldn't have caused this trouble." "Then you mean, it's all my fault?" Snape asked with a straight face. "I don't mean that, and I don't blame you. I also think it's a good thing to return to the Slytherin family at this time. After all, I also want to understand what power is." Anduin smiled. As the Dean of Slytherin, I have an obligation to warn you, don't actively cause trouble for me in the academy. Snape said, narrowing his eyes. If I understand your meaning correctly, if I am passively causing trouble, then there is no problem. Anduin raised his eyebrows and asked. Eloquent. Snape didn't refute Anduin's words, but asked about another matter. I remember I met you once, in Nocturne Alley last summer. Yes, you almost killed me. Anduin was furious when Snape mentioned this. You didn't die. Snape didn't care so much in his urgency at the time. At that time, you had a protective amulet on your body to protect you, which didn't seem like your own. Are you talking about that? Anduin flipped out a pendant from his neckline. Before going to school, he made a necklace with the silver chain Augusta gave him and Lily's charm, and wore it every day. Snape saw the amulet, and his emotions fluctuated slightly. He walked up to Anduin, pinched the amulet and looked at it carefully. Anduin was startled when Snape suddenly got so close. This guy must be a pervert. If he uses that greasy long hair to slap me in the face, will I die on the spot? Anduin thought tangledly. This was given to me by Lily. If you are interested, make one yourself. Anduin reminded. I don't have the habit of robbing other people's things. Snape said coldly when he heard the words, and then stared at the amulet for a while before gently putting it down. Anduin felt that this Snape was a bit inexplicable, but seeing that he had no intention of robbing anything, he didn't say anything more. You don't seem to be in a good situation in Slytherin. Snape didn't know why, but he uncharacteristically began to care about Anduin. Chapter 107. As for that, Headmaster, you don't need to worry too much. I'll take good care of myself. Anduin was a little confused by Snape's inexplicable goodwill and just wanted to go back and do his own thing. All right, you can go back now. I'll warn Wilkes. Remember, don't cause me any trouble. Snape turned around, his back to Anduin, and said. I don't think those guys will obediently listen to your warning, Anduin thought to himself, but he nodded to Snape and left the office. At this moment, Snape, with his back to Anduin, silently shed 2 lines of tears, murmuring Lily's name. After being inexplicably called out by Snape for a chat, Anduin didn't understand what Snape meant, but he had a lot of things to do now. From then on, Anduin moved back to the Slytherin dormitory. Although he was subjected to cold words and sarcasm from the Pure Blood faction every day, they didn't choose to fight in the common room under Snape's warning. But Anduin often felt that he was being followed. Returning to the common room was not a good thing, as it easily exposed his whereabouts. It seemed that those guys had not given up, but the Dark Lord had just fallen, and the Pure Blood faction had restrained themselves a little. Anduin also went to the Potter's funeral, but this time it was different from the funerals of the Pruitt brothers and Marlene McKinnon. The scale was very grand, and there were many people who came to offer condolences. After all, they were the heroes who brought down Voldemort. Not only did most of the members of the Order of the Phoenix and the Ministry of Magic come, but all the members of the Wizengamot Council attended in formal attire, and people from all walks of life came to offer a bouquet of flowers. To commemorate James, Lily, and Harry's outstanding contributions, the Ministry of Magic also specially created a statue of their family of 3 in Godric's Hollow and shielded it with a concealing charm to prevent it from being discovered by Muggles. This funeral was so lively that it even gave him the absurd feeling that those who came to offer condolences were not there to mourn the deceased Potters, but to celebrate the downfall of the Dark Lord. The funeral scene was simply transformed into a bizarre social gathering, with everyone talking about heavy mourning, but the smiles on their faces never diminished. Many members of the Wizengamot Council used to support, or secretly support, the Dark Lord. Now, they all looked grief-stricken, even hypocritically praising the Potters. Seeing this scene made Anduin a little disgusted, so after Dumbledore finished reading the eulogy, Anduin placed a hyacinth in front of the tomb already filled with flowers, and then pulled Hagrid away from there. After returning to Hogwarts, Anduin buried himself in books, rushing back and forth between the library, Hagrid's hut and the Slytherin dormitory every day, using a busy life of studying and research to forget those painful memories. Recently, Anduin planned to make some more interesting alchemical items, so he bought a lot of alchemical materials through Professor Bones' channels, which cost him more than 200 gold galleons. Several weeks later, another alchemical tool was freshly baked in Anduin's hands. In the Slytherin dormitory, in Anduin's room, a small silver-white metal hammer lay quietly on the desk. It was an octagonal hammer, 30 centimeters long, with a hammerhead 10 centimeters long. The entire hammerhead and handle were integrated and made of Agrippa alloy and Etherian silver. The whole body was bright silver like steel, and the handle was wrapped in a layer of tight brown leather, which was just the right size to hold in the hand and very easy to wield. And Anjuin had just engraved runes on the 2 hammer faces and sides of the hammerhead. Anjuin didn't make this hammer as a weapon, but as an auxiliary and research tool. He engraved analysis and manifestation runes on one side of the hammerhead, so that when encountering unfamiliar alchemical tools, a gentle tap with this hammer would reveal the spell patterns on the alchemical tools, making it easy to identify and decipher the runes. At the same time, using it on damaged tools could quickly find out where the problem was. On the other hammer face, Anjuin engraved solidification and enhancement runes. As long as this side was used to tap alchemical tools, the alchemical tools could be strengthened. Repeated hammering could also make the alchemical materials and runes fuse faster, making the connection between them closer. On the side of the hammer, Anjuin engraved a non-harmful rune, so that this hammer would no longer have any killing power. Even if you hit glass or porcelain hard, it wouldn't cause any damage. As a tool to assist me in research and alchemy, from now on, you will be called Harmless Hammer. Anjuin gave this new tool a bland name. Next, let me test your effect. After thinking about it, Anjuin took off the monocle he was wearing and placed it flat on the table, then raised the hammer with his right hand and aimed the solidification side at the lens. To be on the safe side, Anjuin only used a small amount of force and tapped the lens gently. Clang! A crisp sound of hard objects hitting each other was heard. Anjuin felt a wisp of magic power being absorbed by the harmless hammer along his right hand, passing through the hammer handle to the runes on the hammer face, and then clearly acting on the lens at the bottom of the hammer. Anjuin carefully moved the hammer away and saw that the monocle below was not damaged in any way, so he had a bottom line in his heart. Then he became bold and hammered the glasses with a ping-pong pang. After a few minutes of hammering, a circle of runes engraved on the monocle began to flicker with a faint streamer, which was very dazzling. Anjuin picked up the lens and sensed it slightly in his palm. He could sense that the polycite brass and the runes had basically merged into one. After putting it back on and casting the echo charm test, he found that the image transmitted from the glasses was more three-dimensional and clear. It seems the effect is pretty good. Anjuin was overjoyed. After that, Anjuin took out the amulet Lily gave him, and then aimed the side engraved with analysis at the amulet and gently started tapping. After tapping a few times, a set of overlapping composite spells appeared on the amulet, which seemed to be the runes Lily had engraved on it. Anjuin quickly recorded the runes, preparing to study them and see if he could repair the amulet in the future. He had never tried to copy or repair this amulet before, mainly because his iron armor curse could not be fully cast, but recently when he practiced spells, he could feel that his physique and the magic channels on his body should soon be able to support him in casting some high-energy spells. Chapter 108. In this way, the undetectable extension charm, disillusionment charm, confuse charm, and shield charm, even apparition, could all be practiced. And his practice of occlumency had also crossed the entry stage and entered the mastery level. Now, mobilizing magic power was becoming smoother, and he could quickly close his mind. He had also begun practicing legilimency. Indeed, as he had envisioned, he could quickly master this type of mind magic. However, this magic required legilimency on living beings to practice. Previously, he had tried legilimency on Hagrid's boarhound Rhine, but all he could receive was the speechless information of meat, meat, meat. And Hagrid, Charles, and others were his friends, and he didn't plan to try this magic on them. Anjuin packed up and put the innocent hammer into his linen space bag. Seeing this bag again, he couldn't help but think of Sirius, which made him feel even more depressed. After packing up, Anjuin slightly adjusted his mood and got up to leave the dormitory. He was going to the Forbidden Forest hut to check on Charles's training situation. But when he walked out of the dormitory and arrived at the common room, he saw Wilkes, Travers, and others. They seemed to have just heard some good news, with smiles all over their faces. When they saw Anjuin coming out, Wilkes also showed him a sneer, then raised his hand and made a horizontal gesture on his neck with his thumb, provocatively looking at Anjuin. Anjuin narrowed his eyes slightly, ignored them, and quickly left the common room. At this time, Hogwarts was once again filled with the atmosphere of winter. Snowflakes were falling in the sky. Anjuin still remembered that at this time last year, his levitation charm officially entered the extraordinary, but after a year of practice, levitating in the air was still a bit difficult for him. He quickly passed through the ring of stones and gradually approached Hagrid's hut. Charles, who was outside the hut, was not training at this time, but was frowning and looking at the newspaper in his hand. When he saw Anjuan coming, he quickly rushed towards him. Anjuan, have you heard? Charles looked at Anjuan and said cautiously. Only then did Anjuan realize that something was wrong. Recalling the expressions of Traverse and the others in the common room, he frowned and asked, "Heard what? What happened?" Charles looked tangled at this time, thought for a while, and said nervously, "Look for yourself. The Daily Prophet just issued an emergency news report about the Longbottoms." Hearing Charles's words, Anjuan quickly took the newspaper. It had just announced a piece of bad news that made Anjuan collapse. Now sending everyone an urgent news item. At around 2 p.m. on November 21, Frank and Alice Longbottom were found attacked and unconscious near Surrey in southwest London. According to insiders, the two Aurors were investigating traces of Death Eaters at the time, but then the two lost contact with the Auror command. The Aurors who came to track them only found the unconscious Longbottoms. The two are suspected of being tortured by the Cruciatus curse and have been sent to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries for treatment. Please pay attention to subsequent reports. What? Anjuan looked at the contents of the newspaper in shock. The Longbottoms were attacked? I just found out. The Daily Prophet only changes its appearance when there is important news. I know you have a good relationship with the Longbottoms. As Charles was explaining to Anjuan, he found that the snowflakes fluttering within a radius of more than 10 meters around him seemed to be frozen in place, suspended in the air. Anjuan, Anjuan. Charles could feel the terrifying aura surging from the young man in front of him, and quickly called out. I know. Anjuan regained his calm expression, and the snowflakes in the sky seemed to have finally been rescued by Newton and fluttered in the wind. Charles looked at Anjuan's calm expression, but felt the palpable pressure, and Anjuan's eyes were brewing with terrifying things. Thank you, Charles. You can train by yourself today. I have something to deal with. Anjuan said to Charles in a cold tone. Charles didn't have the mood to train at this time. Looking at Anjuan, who was in a bad state, he whispered, Anjuan, you have to be calm and don't do anything stupid. Don't I look calm now? Don't worry, I've never been so calm. Anjuan replied lightly. After saying that, Anjuan walked back to Hogwarts Castle without looking back. Looking at him leaving, Charles didn't know what to do except worry. Anjuan, who was walking back, had a cold expression. He didn't know what he was brewing in his heart. He just went straight to the Slytherin common room after entering the castle. Wilkes and others who were still in the common room were still laughing and making noise. They didn't know what they were about to face. Seeing Anjuan, who had just left not long ago, suddenly come back, Wilkes sneered at him and said nothing, but Anjuan smiled at him, then beckoned his finger and said, "Come out with me." Then Anjuan didn't look at Wilkes's reaction, turned around and walked out. When Wilkes saw this scene, he didn't react. Traverse next to him turned his head and asked him, "What should we do, Senior? Should we follow him?" "Humph, what are you afraid of? Let's go, we'll meet this kid." After saying that, he led 6 people and followed Anjuan. Anjuan went around the main tower and came to an abandoned bathroom on the 2nd floor, then leaned against the windowsill and waited. Wilkes, who followed, saw Anjuan standing there alone, and said with a smile, "Humph, Anjuan, aren't you usually very arrogant? You always ignore us and always hide from us. Why, do you have the guts to ask us out today?" "Ha, this mudblood must have seen the news about those 2 idiots being attacked. Guys who oppose us end up like this. He must be panicked now, afraid that he will lose his life when he walks out of the school gate, and wants to beg us for mercy." Traverse laughed and mocked. Wilkes and others also laughed and leaned towards Anjuan. "I'm sorry," Anjuan said. "What did you say? I didn't hear you." Wilkes put his hand next to his ear pretentiously, with a mocking expression on his face. "What I'm saying is, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you live so comfortably." Anjuan sighed, "Originally, I just regarded you as a bunch of kids and didn't want to be cruel to you. I can only solemnly apologize to you for what will happen next. Please forgive me." Chapter 109. What did you say? Wilkes was stunned. Before anyone could speak, Anjuan's eyes widened in anger, and he clapped his hands together forcefully. Wilkes and the others then heard a whoosh sound on both sides as 2 giant hands made of magic slammed together. The 7 people in the middle felt a sharp pain all over their bodies from the force. Some of them instantly lost their ability to move, their legs weakened, and they collapsed to the ground. Wilkes and another fourth-year student reacted quickly, enduring the pain to quickly get up and reach for their wands. But just as the two of them raised their wands to point at Anjuin, they saw two spells erupting with dazzling light, hitting them hard before they could even react, sending them flying. Wands, come to me. After completing this series of actions, Anjuin raised his left hand and chanted. Then, 7 wands of different styles flew into Anjuin's hand. Ever since he was almost attacked during Christmas last year, he had paid close attention to the detail of disarming opponents after a battle. Ouch! Several young wizards couldn't bear the intense pain and lay on the ground, crying out in pain. Help! Someone, come save me! The fourth-year student, after being knocked down, still knew to call for help. Anjuin, you bastard, you're dead, you're dead. Tavras also fell to the ground. Although his whole body ached, he still stubbornly hurled insults at Anjuin. Anjuin ignored their cries and insults, and walked step by step towards Wilkes, sneering, "Don't worry, I cast a silencing charm here beforehand, no one will hear your voices." "You, what do you want to do?" Wilkes looked up at Anjuin. "I warn you, if you dare to disrespect me, someone will take care of you sooner or later. If you know what's good for you, apologize to us now, otherwise, ah." Anjuin was in no mood to listen to his impotent rage. He stomped on Wilkes' chest and said coldly, "Didn't I apologize to you in the beginning? Now what you should do is tell me everything you know." Tell what? I don't know anything." Wilkes grabbed Anjuin's foot that was stepping on his chest and shouted. "Tell me about the Death Eater attack on the Long Bottoms, and the whereabouts of other Death Eaters. I believe you know." Anjuin had long suspected that these pure-blood factions in Hogwarts were connected to the Death Eaters outside the school, but given that they were all minors, he didn't rashly attack. Moreover, a direct conflict with these guys would definitely be met with resistance from the older pure-blood factions and pure-blood forces outside the school, so he had maintained considerable restraint. But today, Anjuin couldn't bear it anymore. The tragedy of Lily's family happened too suddenly, and Voldemort, who did it, had disappeared. Sirius Black, suspected of being a traitor, was locked up in Azkaban, and there was nothing he could do. However, the Longbottom family had a very close relationship with him. Anjuin, who already regarded Augusta as his elder, could imagine how heartbroken she would be now when she learned of everything that had happened to her children. So on the way back to the castle, Anjuin had already begun to plan his next actions. Dealing with these guys was simple, what he needed to be wary of was the pressure from the upperclassmen and outside the school. After considering the cards he currently held, Anjuin believed that dealing with the oppression of the pure-blood factions within the school was not a big problem. As for outside the school, he could just not leave Hogwarts this year. When Wilkes heard Anjuin's question, he seemed to realize something. The look of fear on his face gradually subsided, and instead he showed a look of mockery. "I was wondering, so you're doing this for those naive fools? They're loyal to the wrong people, so they'll naturally bear the consequences. You might as well worry about yourself. You filthy, ah!" Seeing that Wilkes still had the mind to be foul-mouthed, Anjuin kicked him hard in the stomach again, causing Wilkes to hug his stomach and curl up into a ball in pain. It seems that not all trash is cowardly as a mouse. Very good, I hope your mouth can still be so tough next. Anjuin sneered, then waved his wand and hung everyone except Wilkes upside down. Anjuin even learned this upside-down golden bell spell from Sirius Black. Then Anjuin took out a small stack of paper from his body and said to Wilkes, "It seems I have to apologize for what's going to happen next. I've never used this on a minor before." Anjuin then cast a spell to tightly bind Wilkes' hands and feet. Seeing Anjuin's series of actions, Wilkes couldn't help but feel a tightening in his heart, and shouted loudly, "You, what do you want to do? Let me go." "Ugh!" Wilkes, who was still shouting, saw a piece of paper slowly enlarge in his eyes until it completely covered his face. Aguamenti, Anjuin chanted a spell, and then a stream of water soaked the paper, also soaking Wilkes' nostrils, making it impossible for him to breathe. He could only struggle painfully like a fish being dragged onto land. "You mudblood, what are you doing to Wilkes? Do you want to kill him?" Tavras, who was hanging upside down in the air, saw Anjuin's cruelty and shouted in a trembling voice. "Noisy!" Anjuin cast a sonorous spell on Tavras, and then no matter how hard he shouted, no sound came out. Wilkes, who was lying on the ground, went from struggling desperately at the beginning to twitching weakly now, which made the hearts of those who were hung upside down feel cold. Seeing that the time was almost up, Anjuin removed the wet paper towel from Wilkes' face. Wilkes, who had regained contact with the air, couldn't help but breathe deeply, and then choked himself hard, coughing loudly. "How is it, do you know anything now?" Anjuin asked indifferently. "Pa." Wilkes finally recovered, and when he heard Anjuin's words, he spat a mouthful of saliva at him fiercely. But the saliva just left his mouth and quietly froze in the air, then splashed back at Wilkes, making his face even more ferocious, looking at Anjuin as if he wanted to bite him to death. "I admire people with strong will, because I am too. It seems we have to spend more time." Anjuin couldn't help but sneer when he saw that Wilkes was still holding on. Then Wilkes began to enjoy endless torture. Anjuin was like calmly processing ingredients while cooking, using waterboarding on him again and again, each time removing the wet paper towel when Wilkes was about to run out of breath, and then waiting for Wilkes to recover a little before reapplying the torture. Anjuin didn't ask anything the first few times, just operating on his own. After doing this 7 or 8 times in a row, Wilkes was so tired that he only cared about twitching, and didn't even have the strength to struggle. Chapter 110. At this moment, Anjuin wore what he thought was a very gentle smile, and said, "How about it? Do you remember anything now?" "Ha, ha." Wilkes gasped for breath, looking at Anjuin's devilish expression. What exactly, do you want to know?" "Tell me, who attacked the Longbottoms?" Anjuin asked with a smile, seeing Wilkes relenting. I only know that Robustan Lestrange, Bellatrix, and Rodolphus Lestrange have been on the run recently. Those two might have been targeted by them. I really don't know anything else." Wilkes was almost crying now, feeling his lungs constantly wailing in protest. "The Lestranges? I remember Bellatrix as Sirius's sister, could it be?" Anjuin muttered to himself, then asked, "Where are they now, or where might they be?" "I really don't know. My uncle passed away last Christmas. Besides my uncle, the rest of my family doesn't have a high position among the Death Eaters. If you want to know, ask Traverse. Their family has a higher status among the Death Eaters." Wilkes sobbed, he was really scared now. He had never suffered such torment since he was a child, and now he didn't even dare to look Anjuin in the eyes. Traverse, who was still hanging upside down, had his sonic expulsion curse wear off, and upon hearing Wilkes sell him out like this, he angrily cursed again. "Wilkes, what do you mean? Why would I know things you don't know? Anjuin, if you dare to touch a hair on my head, my uncle won't let you off." Anjuin stood up from beside Wilkes, cast a stunning spell on him with a backhand, knocking him unconscious, and then quietly watched the cursing Traverse, his dark and deep pupils revealing no emotion, staring until Traverse felt chills all over his body. Gold Bell Falls. With Anjuin's spell, Traverse crashed heavily to the ground from mid-air. Before Traverse could start shouting in pain, he saw 2 feet stop in front of him. He looked up and met Anjuin's expressionless face. At this moment, Traverse swallowed hard, really not knowing what to say. "When I was dealing with Wilkes just now, I seemed to have forgotten something." Anjuin grinned, "I clearly know legilimency, how could I forget to use it?" "You, don't come over here." Traverse felt the surrounding air tightly enveloping him, as if being pinched by a pair of large hands, slowly being pulled up from the ground, standing upright and brought in front of Anjuin, his eyes level with Anjuin's gaze. "Look at me!" Anjuin shouted sharply. Hearing this, Traverse reflexively looked into Anjuin's eyes, as if seeing a pair of black holes constantly absorbing his thoughts. Then his gaze was deeply drawn in by those dark pupils. For a young wizard like Traverse with weak willpower and no experience, his brain was like a naked girl lying on a large bed with a thin veil hanging over it. With just a slight lift of the curtain, all the information would be exposed in Anjuin's field of vision. Anjuin's gaze seemed to penetrate layers of mist, opening the door to Traverse's memories. The surrounding wind and clouds surged, constantly stirring up clumps of mist, which after a burst of rolling entanglement, transformed into a simple and gorgeous manor. The vision gradually zoomed in, then passed through the manor's magnificent gate and the corridors filled with antique silverware decorations. A gloomy young face appeared in front of Traverse. Anjuin had seen that person before, it was Samuel Traverse's uncle, the Death Eater. It seemed that in Samuel's memory, this uncle could give him a strong sense of security. "Samuel, soon the Dark Lord's authority will envelop this land. Watch, the Traverse family is about to gain more power," Samuel's uncle boasted to him with a laugh. His uncle seemed to have said something else, but at this time the scene turned into thick fog again, reorganized, and the vision was placed in a dark house, surrounded by various bookshelves and alchemy materials, which looked like a library and treasure room. Samuel's mother, the young woman with light golden hair, appeared beside him. The Dark Lord instructed us to transfer some dark magic items to my younger brother, who is now the master of Malfoy Manor. The young woman said as she walked with Samuel, then took down several items from the surrounding shelves, including an ordinary-looking notebook, a strange statue, and so on. "Mom, what is this?" Samuel asked, pointing to something 1 meter long beside him, like a dried root. "That is a Hebridean black dragon heartstring. Originally, I wanted to cut it and make a wand. Such a long, complete heartstring is rare. Maybe it can be made into a good alchemy tool for you in the future." The young woman chuckled. "Remember this place, these are the foundations that allow the Traverse family to prosper in the wizarding world." The young woman warned Samuel. "Aren't we born noble? Don't we have noble blood flowing through our veins, naturally different from those dirty muggles?" Samuel stared at the young woman and said. "That's what your uncle told you again, isn't it?" The young woman looked at Samuel unhappily. "Even if our bloodline is noble, we can't get carried away. Anyway, just remember it." The memory condensed into a picture and turned into a cloud again, constantly rolling and expanding, and then transformed into another scene. In another gorgeous manner, the young woman pulled Samuel to look at the two people opposite them, or rather 3 people. One of the adult men had neatly combed golden hair. A young woman with her hair up sat next to the man, holding a little boy in her arms. "Lucius, Narcissa, long time no see. Is little Draco already so big?" the blonde woman said with a smile. "Yulia, your complexion is still so good. Lucius heard you were coming and specially prepared a rich dessert for you," Narcissa said with a smile. "Dobby, Dobby!" Lucius shouted loudly, "Sorry, the house elf I just bought recently is not very sensible." After Lucius shouted several times, a house elf who looked not very old appeared out of thin air beside his master. "Master, what are your orders?" "You idiot, why are you so slow to react?" Lucius couldn't help but raise his cane and hit Dobby twice. "Where are the desserts I told you to prepare?" "Sorry master, sorry, Dobby will bring it to you right away," Dobby nervously begged in a low voice. Chapter 111. "All right, I'm here on serious business this time. These items are entrusted to me by the Dark Lord to be placed here with you. Remember to take good care of them. Your place is less conspicuous, and your vault is relatively hidden. Do you understand what this means? It represents the Master's trust in you, and it's a great honor." Yulia took out a package and said. Lucius, upon hearing the name of the Dark Lord, immediately shrunk back his head nervously. "Is that so? Thank you for the Master's grace, allowing me to have the honor of serving the future ruler of the wizarding world." Lucius respectfully took the package, left his spot, and appeared to be going to store the items. Staying behind, Yulia smiled and looked at Narcissa. "By the way, Narcissa, how has your sister Bellatrix been lately? It's been a while since I last saw her." "She's been by the Dark Lord's side all the time. I haven't seen them in a long time either. I heard her husband was ordered to build a secret base in Mole Valley in Surrey. Maybe it won't be long before we can gather there," Narcissa said with a smile. After the two young women chatted for a few more sentences, Lucius walked out, but still holding something in his hand. He handed the item in his hand to his sister and said, "I know the Traverse family has that thing. This was collected by our father from an Egyptian wizard many years ago. It's said to be a very rare prototype rune. Unfortunately, father had that accident later, so he couldn't completely decipher it before he died. Now the magic power of this recording crystal is about to dissipate, and I can't completely transfer it to another recording crystal. You should record it onto that one." Yulia took the crystal, complaining as she looked at Lucius, "Look at you, you don't even try to improve yourself. You can't even properly preserve your father's legacy." Lucius curled his lips. He knew his magical skill was limited, otherwise he wouldn't have asked Yulia for help. At this point, the scene once again turned into a cloud and dissipated. Anjuin also ended his legilimency spell, muttering in a low voice, "Mole Valley in Surrey. That's very close to where the Longbottoms were attacked. Also, these pure-blood families sure have a lot of good stuff." At this moment, although only a dozen seconds had passed, Sample felt as if he had spent several hours. All the secrets of his body had been seen through by the man in front of him. He was flushed with shame and anger, looking at Anjuin with venom. How dare you spy on the secrets of the noble Traverse family? Sample said hatefully. In my eyes, you so-called noble pure-blood families are just a joke. You should probably ask yourselves, how do you have the audacity to provoke me? Anjuin contemptuously threw Traverse to the ground. Then, with a wave of his wand, everyone floating in the air fell to the ground. Anjuin smiled mockingly at these guys and said, I'll let you go today, but I'm confiscating your wands. If you want them back, prepare a ransom of 20 galleons each. After all, this is your first wand. Anjuin chuckled one last time before turning around and leaving the bathroom. Traverse watched Anjuin leave triumphantly, itching with hatred. He punched the floor of the bathroom, then couldn't help but grimace in pain. What do we do now? A pure-blood little wizard next to him asked, trembling. He was still lingering in fear from what had just happened. What else can we do? First, wake up that idiot Wilkes, and then see if there's any way, Traverse said hatefully. What? That guy took all our wands? Wilkes exclaimed as he woke up. Yes, Senior Wilkes, that guy is too domineering. Not only did he beat us up, but he also robbed us, a pure-blood little wizard complained. Damn it, why don't we report it to the head of house? Anyway, that guy made the first move. Let's get the wands back first, and then find a chance to deal with that guy later, another pure-blood little wizard said. No, this shameful matter can't be publicized. Besides, it's hard to accuse him if we weren't caught on the spot. What if that bastard destroys all our wands in a fit of anger? Even if the head of house helps us, he won't receive any substantial punishment, at most a period of detention, the fellow fourth-year little wizard said. In this way, let's go find Prefect Yaxley and have him help us think of a way. Today's humiliation, I must return it 100-fold to that mudblood, Wilkes said viciously. Daring to disrespect the Traverse family, I must make him pay for it with blood. Sample Traverse shouted, feeling more and more angry the more he thought about it, full of resentment. Yes, make him pay with blood. The others echoed in unison. After thinking about it, the group cleaned themselves up and walked aggressively towards the Slytherin common room. Meanwhile, after a while, a woo-woo-woo crying sound came from a cubicle in the bathroom. A female student ghost wearing glasses floated out of it. So scary, that little wizard scared Myrtle to death. Fortunately, I hid well just now, otherwise I might have to die again. Myrtle touched her tears, recalling everything that had just happened in the bathroom. The aura on that little wizard scared her so much that she didn't dare to show her face. Slytherin dormitory, inside Rolly Yaxley's room. A group of little wizards who had been beaten by Anjuin squeezed in, constantly telling Yaxley about everything they had just encountered. In other words, 7 of you were taught a lesson by a second-year muggle wizard? And you lost your wands. Yaxley looked at everyone speechlessly. You've simply disgraced the pure-blood wizarding families. That guy's methods are vicious, and he doesn't put us in his eyes at all. He even said he's going to come after you in the future, Wilkes added fuel to the fire. Humph! Yaxley glared at Wilkes, then roared, ignorant little bastard. Yes, that guy is ridiculously arrogant. You have to stand up for us. Tonight, let's go find that kid and give him a hard time, so he knows how powerful we are, Traverse said hatefully. Yaxley squinted his eyes and pondered for a while, then said in a deep voice, No, Professor Bones has been watching me very closely recently, and Vanessa will definitely stand up for that guy. At most, we can make that guy suffer a little in Hogwarts. Then what do you say we do? Wilkes asked. Wait until he leaves Hogwarts before making a move. I know you've been watching that guy all along. Christmas is coming soon. You guys pay attention to that kid's movements during the holidays. As long as he leaves the school, we can naturally block him, Yaxley said. Chapter 112. What if he doesn't leave the school during the holidays? Traverse asked. Then we'll wait for the Easter holidays. If he's still hiding his head in the sand by Easter, we'll wait for the summer holidays. If he's still hiding then, we'll wait until next year. He'll be in his 3rd year next year, right? Yaxley laughed. What do you mean? Wilkes seemed to realize something. Exactly. 3rd-year students always go to Hogsmeade, and Professor Bones should be leaving next year. The Dark Lord's curse is no joke. Vanessa will also be graduating soon, and then Slytherin will be mine. Don't you want to restore the glory of the pure blood families and make that guy pay for his blood debt? Next year, we'll make him bleed properly, in every sense of the word. Yaxley said with a gloomy smile. Then, what about our wands? Are we going to have to buy new ones? Those are our first wands, the ones with the highest compatibility. And are we just going to let that guy continue to be arrogant for another 6 months? Traverse said indignantly. What's the rush? A viper always has to lie dormant before it can strike a fatal blow. Yaxley stroked his chin. As for the wands, you can pay the ransom and get them back first. You need to be patient. Don't provoke him again in these 6 months. What? Really pay that kid money? Isn't that like bowing down to him? Traverse couldn't understand. This is also to teach you a lesson. It's not convenient for us older students to move around in the school recently. That old guy Bones is not simple. I can always feel someone watching me. I have to wait until he's gone before I can let go. Yaxley frowned slightly. His strength was not weak, and he could sense that inexplicable sense of being watched, but he really couldn't figure out how it was done. On the other side, Anjuin arrived at Professor Bones's office and found the office door wide open. Professor Bones was sitting leisurely at his desk, the runes on the side of his monocle constantly emitting a faint light. It could be seen that Professor Bones had been using this alchemical item to observe something. Professor, Anjuin said softly, seeing that Bones's mind was mostly on the glasses. Bones came back to his senses, noticed Anjuin, nodded, and said, Anjuin, what's wrong? It doesn't seem to be evening yet. Have you heard about the Longbottoms? Anjuin said in a deep voice. Bones frowned upon hearing this. I just received news. Amelia, who is responsible for taking care of them, sent me a message. They are out of danger, but because they were tortured by the Cruciatus curse for a long time during the attack, they have not yet woken up. When Anjuin heard that the two were out of danger, he felt relieved and said, I received news in Slytherin that I know who attacked the Longbottoms. Bones sat up straight and stared at Anjuin, asking, Are you sure? Yes, the source of the information should be very reliable. Anjuin recalled the information he had interrogated from Traverse and Wilkes and said with certainty. Who is it? After a long period of contact, Bones knew that Anjuin was still very reliable. Robistan, Bellatrix, Rodolphus, and others from the Lestranges. I heard that they have a secret stronghold near the Mole River Valley in Surrey, which is very close to where the Longbottoms were attacked. It is possible that they found the two patrolling near there. Anjuin said. Professor Bones couldn't help but look at Anjuin again. This young man not only knew the attackers but even knew their hiding place. This didn't seem like the kind of information he said he could easily find out. Anjuin, I know you have a good relationship with the Longbottoms, but heaven and hell are often only one step away. Even the Dark Lord was a promising talent before he fell. Do you understand what I mean? Professor Bones said earnestly to him. I understand what you mean. Don't worry, I have a clear understanding of myself, but, Anjuin paused, I am a Slytherin after all. Following the rules is not my habit. Bones nodded slightly. He knew that some things could only be hinted at, so he said seriously, the Lestranges have been wanted by the Ministry of Magic for a long time. I have also considered whether this matter is related to them, but we still don't know where they are hiding. Your news is very timely. I will inform Moody immediately. Anjuin nodded, then turned and walked out of the office. Bones looked at the departing Anjuin with great concern. Such a promising young man must not go astray. That night, in the Slytherin dormitory, Anjuin saw Rozier coming to find him and said with a smile, I didn't expect them to send you to find me. Rozier received orders from Wilkes and others to help redeem the wand. Wilkes and others were too embarrassed to face Anjuin again. What did you do to Senior Wilkes? His eyes turn red whenever he hears your name. Rozier was very timid when he saw Anjuin, but he still asked quietly. Then you have to ask him yourself. Stop talking nonsense. Did you bring the money? Anjuin sneered. This is 140 galleons. How did you do this? They are actually willing to pay to redeem the wand. Although Rozier didn't know what had happened before, he knew that Anjuin had confiscated the wands of those people. Originally, Rozier thought they would gather people to snatch them back, but who knew they would be so cowardly? It seems they are not very stupid, or rather, there are some smart people. Anjuin did not directly answer Rozier's question, took the gold coins, and answered irrelevantly. What What do you mean? Roger asked puzzled. Now they don't dare to make a big fuss at school. They have to wait for me to relax my vigilance, right? Anjuan sneered, did they reveal any plans to deal with me? Not really, but I think they all hate you to the core. They definitely won't let it go. Roger said, recalling the expressions of the crowd just now. I won't let them go so easily either. Go back and keep a close eye on those guys for me. Remember to notify me if there is any disturbance. Anjuan instructed. Understood, but, are you really going to start a full-scale war with them? I see how they look, they won't be like dealing with Gryffindor. If there is bloodshed, you may be ordered to drop out of school, and may even be imprisoned in Azkaban. Roger shrank his head and said. Chapter 113. Humph, they'd have to catch me first, and besides, I'm the victim here. All right, go back, contact me if anything happens, Anjuan said dismissively. Roger had no choice but to nod, turning and leaving Anjuan's room. Looks like my guess was right. Recently, those guys haven't dared to fight directly in the school. Professor Bones has indeed been monitoring the entire academy. But in the afternoon, Professor Bones clearly didn't know about my actions in the bathroom. It seems the professor is mainly focused on the older students. Anjuan pondered all this, feeling basically confident. Looks like I need to hurry. They definitely won't let this go. In the next half year, I need to start that plan, Anjuan thought resolutely. Not many days later, Hogwarts Christmas holidays began. Anjuan decided that he would no longer leave the campus during this year's holidays, dedicating all his energy to arming himself, and improving his combat power as much as possible. After the Christmas holidays began, Anjuan moved back to the Forbidden Forest cabin. Through numerous letters with Augusta, he learned about the current state of the Longbottoms. Due to the insane torture of the Cruciatus curse by the Death Eaters, Frank and Alice had suffered almost irreversible injuries, their memories almost completely lost, and they could only live in St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries under constant care. From the lines of Augusta's reply, Anjuan could truly feel how much pain she was in, but she forced herself to be strong, because little Neville needed her. You do the first day of the lunar month, don't blame me for doing the 15th. A dangerous glint flashed in Anjuan's eyes. Hagrid was very happy that Anjuan could return to the cabin to accompany him during the Christmas holidays, but other than eating, he spent almost all his time in his small room, and there were often sounds of clanging and banging. Because it was Christmas, Anjuan also took the initiative to ask Hagrid for a chimera skin as a gift. The chimera is a magical creature native to Greece, very bloodthirsty and violent. It has the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a fire dragon. Hagrid used to use it as a pillowcase, and the leather is very tough. One day at dinner, Hagrid saw Anjuan reading a book introducing pure-blood families with great interest, and couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong, Anjuan, why are you reading this kind of book?" "After all, know yourself and your enemy, and you will never be defeated," Anjuan replied nonchalantly. "Never be defeated? What do you mean? Why do I have a dangerous feeling?" Hagrid frowned. "It's nothing," Anjuan didn't say much, shaking his head, "did you know? As pure-blood families, they have actually been opposed to the International Statute of Secrecy since it came into effect. They have gathered followers more than once, trying to launch a full-scale war with Muggles." "Really? That's terrible," Hagrid said. "But after many years, many pure-blood wizards have begun to voluntarily maintain the Statute of Secrecy. This is why many pure-blood families have not sided with the Death Eaters." Anjuan had recently borrowed many books, periodicals, and gossip publications related to wizarding families from the library. "Oh? Why is that?" Hagrid asked curiously. "On the one hand, it's for profit. Many pure-blood families maintain the Statute of Secrecy while marrying Muggles, and also annex a large number of assets and land through transactions with Muggles. Many pure-blood families themselves have a place in the upper class of the Muggle world. Naturally, they will not allow those Muggle-hating Death Eaters to destroy this situation," Anjuan teased. "What about the other hand?" "The other hand," Anjuan blinked, looking at Hagrid, "guess who would win if the Wizarding world and the Muggle world went to war?" "How would I know? But wizards have magic, so wizards should have the upper hand," Hagrid thought for a while, and said truthfully. Anjuan shook his head, "No, if the two sides really went to war, I guarantee that the Wizarding world would not be able to withstand the Muggle offensive at all. You are not a Muggle, so you don't know, the power of Muggle weapons is beyond the imagination of wizards. Wizards would be lucky to escape the Muggle search and attack. Many pure-blood families have a clear understanding of this because of their long-term contact with Muggles. They are not willing to lose their lives because of this stupid suicidal behavior. What? Are Muggles that scary? But I've seen a lot of Muggles, they don't even have magic, they can't make something disappear out of thin air, and they can't turn a mouse into a teacup. Hagrid was taken aback by Anjuin's remarks. You're right, wizards have an advantage in this kind of supernatural power, but in terms of destructive power alone, the two sides are not on the same level at all. Have you ever seen magic that can destroy a small island with a flick of a finger? Anjuin asked with a smile. Gee, are you kidding me? How could there be such magic? Hagrid looked incredulous. But Muggles do, so maintaining and protecting the statute of secrecy is the most responsible way for the wizarding world, but... Anjuin pondered. But what? But if wizards are always ignorant of the Muggle world, and their understanding of Muggles remains at the level of hundreds of years ago, it is easy to develop a sense of superiority that is almost ignorant, like the Death Eaters, and that is the most dangerous thing, Anjuin shrugged. You mean that kind of unique cognition will give rise to organizations like the Death Eaters? Good heavens, that's terrible. Doesn't that mean that even if the Death Eaters are destroyed, in a few decades, another group of people like the Death Eaters will appear? Hagrid asked with wide eyes. Anjuin nodded and said, it seems you have also realized it. In fact, this situation has happened before. Grindelwald, who almost swept the international wizarding world, was like this. Even now, there are still organizations like the Purifiers in the American magical world, and the Native Soil Society in Northern Europe is also very active. Because many of their members have never been exposed to the Muggle world, it is easy to develop an inexplicable sense of superiority over Muggles who do not have magic, and then be bewitched, used, or coerced by people with ulterior motives, and then gradually turn to depravity. Good heavens! Anjuin's words almost subverted Hagrid's understanding of the world. So the magical world in other countries is so terrible? It's like someone telling him that in this seemingly peaceful and stable world, there are actually terrorists everywhere. Chapter 114. So, only by becoming strong can you truly grasp your destiny, otherwise, even ensuring your own safety becomes a major problem. Reading, Anjuin said, closing the book and smiling slightly. But these things are still too far away from us for now. Let's just enjoy our Christmas dinner. Oh, right, this is my Christmas gift to you. Anjuin took out a silver white metal coin and pushed it in front of Hagrid. Oh? What's this? Doesn't look like a silver sickle. Hagrid picked up the metal coin and scrutinized it closely. Well, I currently call it a communication coin. Its functions aren't complete yet. The side with the sword is the front, and the side with the Ouroboros is the back. It's an alchemical item I made recently, Anjuin said with a smile. Communication coin? Could this little thing transmit messages? Hagrid repeatedly flipped the metal coin over, and sure enough, he saw a simple, oriental longsword on one side and an Ouroboros on the other. That's right. If you encounter danger, just input magic into the sword side, and I'll receive an alert and your current location. I'll come to support you immediately. If you just want to find me normally, input magic into the Ouroboros side, and I'll receive the message and come to your hut. Anjuin felt that the current magical world didn't have any devices that could directly send alerts, which was too backward. Therefore, based on the knowledge in the book application of contact runes that Sirius gave him last year, he imitated the flow network and made this alchemical item. However, its current functions are still very weak, and the range of communication only covers Hogwarts. It can't transmit messages in real time like the flow network. As samples, he made quite a few and sent some as Christmas gifts to Vivian, Charles, and others. That'll make it much easier to find you in the future. You're so clever. Hagrid, after hearing about the little gadget's function, repeatedly tried it with great interest. Anjuin also took out a small booklet, which was also an alchemical item, connected to the several communication coins he had sent out. As soon as he received a message, he could quickly see it on the booklet. The two chatted and played with the new alchemical items, eating hot pot and singing songs, peacefully spending this year's Christmas. In the days that followed, Anjuin stayed in his hut every day, researching spells and trying to make various alchemical items. At the same time, owls from the outside world constantly traveled to and from his hut. Many of them were letters and gifts from friends. Charles and Professor McGonagall still sent some Quidditch merchandise as gifts. Vivian knew that Anjuin liked to read, so she also sent some magic books as gifts. Professor Bones was very generous, sending him 3 ounces of Ethereum silver and a set of carving knives, showing that Professor Bones was very optimistic about Anjuin's alchemical talent. This was a form of encouragement, hoping that he would go further on this path. From Professor Bones' letter, Anjuin learned that the Longbottom's mental trauma was more serious than imagined. They couldn't remember anyone and had even lost the ability to take care of themselves. In the future, they could only stay in the hospital for care. The Lestrange's hideout in Surrey was found by a team of hit wizards and aurors led by Moody, and a fierce battle broke out there. Bella and others were successfully captured at the cost of 2 aurors being seriously injured and have now been sent to Azkaban. In the letter, Professor Bones also expressed his gratitude to Anjuin for providing the information. Anjuin shook his head speechlessly at this. In a surprise attack, the auror side still suffered casualties, which made him question the tactical literacy of these aurors. Why don't they set up defenses in advance and attack in stages? How is the battle of a regular army like a child's fight, stupidly rushing up together? Anjuin thought helplessly. Just as the Christmas holiday was about to end, an owl arrived in front of Anjuin's hut with a large package. Finally arrived. Opening the package, a pair of brand new leather boots came into view. If Hagrid were there, he would definitely be able to tell that they were made from the chimera hide he gave. These were custom made from Twilfit and Tattings in Diagon Alley for 5 galleons, using that chimera hide. The quality of the finished product was very good, and he planned to turn these boots into an alchemical item. It's time to start building all-terrain tactical gear, Anjuin said with a gratified smile. All-terrain tactical gear was a set of tactical equipment envisioned by Anjuin, including sensing, interference, movement, protection, and lethality modules. If it could be fully assembled, it would be a tactical model designed to counter all terrains, all directions, and all types of enemies. These boots were one of them, serving as an alchemical carrier for the movement module. Anjuin planned to enchant them with runes such as shock absorption, silence, adhesion, enhancement, and transformation. This would be very helpful for lurking, traversing terrain, short-distance bursts, and long-distance sprints. After all, his current flying was still unstable, and riding a broomstick in battle was easy to be targeted. Only by increasing the speed of instantaneous bursts can he use his footwork to gain an advantage in battle. The relevant runes had been completely mastered in his tireless study and practice, and now it was time to test the results. It took him 2 full days to inscribe the runes on the leather boots and use the non-injury hammer to reinforce and strengthen the item. The next day at noon, the Hogwarts students had all returned to school, and they were preparing to start classes the next day. It was also the day he would return to the Slytherin dormitory. Anjuin gave this new equipment a grotesque name, Phase Boots. He put on the newly made leather boots, tapped his heels together, and wisps of light-colored runes began to appear on the boots. He raised his right leg and exerted force forward. With a swoosh, Anjuin darted forward a distance like a gust of wind. After observing backward, Anjuin nodded. The distance of 20 meters only took a little over a second, so 100 meters would be a little over 6 seconds, which is faster than the current Olympic champion. That's good enough. Next, test the terrain traversal and physical consumption. Thinking this, he sprinted along the path and quickly arrived at the ring of stone piles. He jumped up with all his might, leaping more than 2 meters high, stepping on the side of a stone pillar, and then running upwards on the wall, completely defying gravity. After reaching a height of more than 10 meters, he did a backflip, leaving the stone pillar and falling down. Then, like a gymnast, he landed steadily, with his hands raised upwards, like a gymnast landing. Chapter 115. Adsorption effect is qualified, shock absorption effect is qualified, silent reaction is qualified, physical consumption is about 3 times that of normal running, but the fatigue is much greater than normal exercise. Is it because the body's load has a limit? It seems that it cannot be used as a regular prop. Anjuin tested the effect of the phase boots while feeling the operation of various functions of his body, and had a general idea of this way of moving. With the current physical condition, if the speed is turned to the limit, it can only last for about 10 minutes. If it is slightly started as an assist for exercise, there is no time limit. Anjuin nodded thoughtfully, and then walked to the library. He planned to spend some time supplementing his knowledge of memory magic. The Longbottom couple suffered severe trauma and lost all their memories. Although the possibility was small, Anjuin still wanted to try to find a way to help them recover their memories as soon as possible. Madame Pants, where are the books about memory magic? Anjuin asked Madame Pants after arriving at the library. It's Anjuin. Madame Pants was very familiar with Anjuin, and often saw him running to the library. Memory magic, let me think, you can go to the 27th row of bookshelves to find it, there should be some there. Thank you. After arriving at the corresponding location, Anjuin began to search carefully. After a while, Anjuin pulled out a book called Introduction to Obliviation Charms and read it in detail. After reading it for a while, it was basically some casting skills of obliviation charms, which was not helpful for learning memory magic. He put the book back in place and started searching through the books one by one. Oh, dear Junior, are you looking for learning materials for memory magic? A slightly frivolous voice came from behind Anjuin. Anjuin turned his head and saw a male student who looked like a senior wizard, with light brown hair, and wearing a flamboyant blue robe. He could smell a strong perfume smell from 2 meters away. Yes, senior. Anjuin rarely interacted with other wizards in the school, didn't know this senior, and could only reply politely. Haha, then you are lucky. As a wizard who is proficient in various spells and is very popular among girls of all grades, if you don't mind, I am willing to give you some pointers. The flamboyant man showed a very charming smile. Anjuin couldn't help but show a tangled expression. He really wanted to tell this senior that basically all the wizards in Hogwarts who were proficient in spells had participated in the spell club, and he knew all of them, but he didn't know you. However, Anjuin felt that directly rejecting him would seem a little unkind, so he just dealt with it. Is that so? Then please give me some pointers, senior. Since you sincerely asked, as I am deeply loved by students of all grades, I naturally cannot turn a blind eye. I suggest you take a look at this. After all, helping young wizards grow and cultivating talents for the British magical world is also the driving force that drives me forward. This flamboyant male wizard tiptoed, lightly twisted his hands, paced to the side of the bookshelf, pulled out a book with an exaggerated thickness, and handed it over. This book brain region and memory should be able to help you. I have only read a part of this book, and it can make my obliviation charm superb. The man raised his eyebrows at Anjuin and winked. Anjuin took the book with great suspicion. Just as he was about to say something, a familiar voice suddenly came from the side. Lockhart, what are you doing? Are you harassing our students again? Anjuin turned his head and saw that it was Vanessa. Oh, Vanessa, long time no see. I'm sorry I didn't reply to the love letter you sent me right away. You have to know that I always have to take care of the girls in our academy first, don't you? Lockhart said to Vanessa with a smile, but as he spoke, Vanessa took out her wand and looked at him with unkind eyes, scaring Lockhart to shrink his head and run away, disappearing from Anjuin's eyes in a few seconds. Phew! He runs really fast. Anjuin sighed, and then looked at Vanessa. Senior, you. Anjuin had just heard that this senior had sent love letters to others. He didn't expect to hear such gossip when he came to the library. It's not what you think. Vanessa said with a gloomy face, that guy is Gilderoy Lockhart, who is in the same grade as me. He is a shameless and arrogant idiot who likes to brag to others. All the love letters are fake. He pretended to be other female students and sent himself love letters during Valentine's Day 2 years ago. He received hundreds of love letters in one day, even from Professor McGonagall. Wow, he's brave enough. Anjuin raised his eyebrows. Humph, no one likes that guy. He just likes to show off to people like you who don't know him, otherwise who would give him a good look. Vanessa curled her lips. Well, you will all graduate this year, and I probably won't have many opportunities to see the senior in the future. Anjuin said with a smile. Well, I will be busy preparing for the Wizarding Ultimate examination in the second half of the year. Pay attention to it when you have nothing to do. I know that some people in the academy don't like you. Vanessa said after hearing Anjuin mention graduation, and remembering something. Thank you for your reminder, Senior Vanessa. Anjuin nodded. Now those people don't just dislike me, they are ready to swallow me alive. Vanessa chatted with Anjuin for a few words, then turned and left, while Anjuin looked at the big book in his hand. Anyway, reading is reading, so he opened it and read it. If he hadn't read it, Anjuin would have been attracted by the content of the book. This book elaborated in detail on memory magic, thinking runes, and related knowledge of the brain, and also had a very detailed description of the composition of obliviation charms and memory. It seems that this Senior Lockhart is not useless. This book alone is enough for me to digest for a while. Anjuin happily borrowed the book from the library. Back in the Slytherin common room, ignoring the hostile eyes of many pure-blood wizards, he quietly returned to his dormitory. The following days passed day by day in a strange atmosphere. Those pure-blood wizards clearly hated Anjuin to death, but they didn't do anything out of the ordinary. Anjuin was happy to be idle, and still lived a secluded life every day, attending classes, participating in the spell club, studying runes with Professor Bones, supervising Charles's training, taking time to create alchemy props, and studying memory magic. Chapter 116. While Traverse and Wilkes' group didn't directly clash with Anjuin, they still sent people to secretly monitor his every move. However, after only a little over a month, those responsible for tracking and surveillance were frequently ambushed. Some were found hanging in the corridors, while others were stripped naked and left in the nearby women's restroom. But when asked what happened, these guys collectively lost their memories, completely unable to recall anything. After several incidents, the pure-blood wizards were too afraid to continue tracking Anjuin, much to the irritation of Wilkes, Traverse, and the others. But Anjuin didn't care about that. The school life at Hogwarts gradually returned to peace. Since the disappearance of the Dark Lord, the number of prank incidents at Hogwarts had skyrocketed, causing the mischievous ghost Peeves to become increasingly active. In previous years, Peeves rarely came out. Anjuin even consulted Professor Flitwick about this strange phenomenon. Professor Flitwick told him that Peeves was born with the entire Hogwarts castle, belonging to the oldest and most special type of ghost, closely connected to the entire school. He's affected by the pranks and emotions within the school. In previous years, the wizarding world was shrouded in darkness, and there wasn't enough laughter and mischief on campus, so Peeves became listless and sometimes didn't even come out. But now it's different. But this infuriated Filch, causing him to patrol the campus day and night, catching several mischievous little wizards almost every day. Now, the toilet cleaning duty is booked out until next year. That night, Filch, as usual, patrolled the library, and a slight noise from the restricted section caught his attention. Filch quickly strode towards the direction of the sound, holding his kerosene lamp and looking around, but there was no one in sight except for the air. Not even a rat could be seen. Muttering curses, Filch repeatedly checked again before reluctantly leaving. And in a corner where Filch had just searched, a figure suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was Anjuin. That was close. I didn't expect some of the forbidden books to have magical alarms. I almost got caught, Anjuin thought with lingering fear. And why was he able to appear here? It was because he had finally mastered the disillusionment charm. In the second half of this year, Anjuin's physical condition finally met the requirements for using advanced spells, so he spent a lot of time practicing the shield charm and disillusionment charm, and now he has basically raised these two spells to the mastery level. Having mastered the shield charm, he could begin researching and replicating Lily's protection charm. And with the disillusionment charm, wouldn't it be a waste not to use it for night excursions? So, during this time, Anjuin would cast the spell on himself every night and run to the restricted section of the library to check forbidden books. But this place is worthy of being called the restricted section. Many of the books here have been cursed or have magical alarms. Flipping through them casually can easily trigger the alarm. Anjuin was almost discovered just now due to carelessness. Seeing Filch walk away, Anjuin cast another disillusionment charm on himself and continued searching for the books he wanted. However, he was much more careful now, checking the books with finite incantatum and detect curse before flipping through them. Found it. After spending 2 hours, Anjuin finally found the information he wanted. Runes that can drive the flow of magic and energy storage runes. I've collected almost enough these days. It's a pity that these should be 3-dimensional runes. The rune images recorded in the book are 2-dimensional. It's not easy to restore these runes based on these planar images and the descriptions in the book alone, Anjuin pondered. He had recently begun researching the temperature control spells from the Magic Club. In the club, Anjuin learned that to affect temperature, one needs to master the control and flow of heat, which requires the help of runes that drive the flow of magic. He also had another idea for magic-driven runes. He envisioned, while researching runes that drive the flow of magic, trying to develop a rune that could autonomously absorb external magic. At the same time, he was also looking for runes that could achieve magic storage. Magical equipment like his monocle and phase boots are driven by directly absorbing his own magic when activated. Alchemical items that can be autonomously driven require runes with magic storage functions, just like batteries, to continuously drive the magical items. Anjuin learned from Professor Bones that there are currently various types of magic storage runes, but the effects are generally average. More often, the energy storage function of the alchemical materials themselves is used. Most alchemical items on the market are of this type. So, combining magic-absorbing runes and energy storage runes can indirectly extend the driving time of magical items, which is like adding a solar panel to a battery, charging while providing power. After comparing several energy storage runes he learned from Professor Bones, he felt unsatisfied, so he thought of coming to the restricted section to look for relevant information on energy storage runes, while also collecting more research data on the direction of magic flow. The harvest this time was good, but unfortunately, they were all paper materials, and a large number of experiments and tests were needed to restore the corresponding rune combinations. If I have to choose between the driving and storage directions, I should start with the research on magic driving runes first. On the one hand, I can accumulate data on magic absorption, and on the other hand, I can conduct research on temperature control runes, Anjuin decided. For the rest of the semester, Anjuin continued to maintain a highly disciplined life and study routine, basically not communicating with the surrounding classmates. The Wizarding World launched a vigorous campaign to arrest Death Eaters, and the entire Department of Magical Law Enforcement was mobilized by Minister Millicent Bagnold. Many pure-blood families also received investigations. Anjuin and Professor Bones also discussed this. Bones believed that these measures were not enough to defeat those pure-blood families who supported the Dark Lord. Many Death Eaters from pure-blood families defended themselves by claiming they were controlled by the Imperious Curse or that the perpetrator had taken Polyjuice Potion and was framed. So, unless caught on the spot, it was difficult to arrest a Death Eater. Is it useless to check memories and use Verita Serum? Anjuin once asked the professor. But this is a magical world, so all kinds of things can be faked, including memories. Chapter 117. Anjuin also felt very helpless about this, but although these investigations had little effect on those pure-blood families, they also restrained their arrogance a lot, which even affected those pure-blood Slytherin students. No one had been tracking him for a while, which meant he had fewer practice materials for legilimency and memory charms. During the previous period, Anjuin's progress in these two spells was gratifying because he could practice on live subjects. However, he didn't dare to blatantly grab some pure-blood wizards to use. Professor Bones was monitoring Hogwarts regardless of who you were. Recently, Anjuin also noticed that a faint wave of magic occasionally swept past him. It seemed that the professor was afraid he would cause trouble and had included him in the observation list. Since that's the case, then I'll deal with those guys all at once next semester. He didn't want to keep enemies that kept him awake at night. And so, Anjuin's second year at Hogwarts came to an end. Professor Bones resigned 2 weeks before the final exams. Although the Dark Lord had disappeared, he didn't want to challenge the power of the curse on the defense against the dark arts. Anjuin completed all his exams this year with top marks, while Vivian still had serious subject preferences, barely passing other subjects besides history of magic. At the end of year farewell banquet, Headmaster Dumbledore announced the House Cup winner for the year. The honest and reliable Hufflepuff House took home the final crown. Ravenclaw's Quidditch matches were almost all losses this year, which put them behind a lot of points. Slytherin and Gryffindor still completely slacked off, and this year they were still fighting fiercely, with more points deducted than added. When choosing third-year elective courses, after consideration, he decided to choose Ancient Runes and Care of Magical Creatures. He was already very familiar with Ancient Runes. Choosing this course basically guaranteed that he would get an excellent grade in it. And after being in contact with Hagrid for a long time, he also had a deep understanding of magical creature knowledge, and mastering more magical creature knowledge would also be very helpful to his alchemy. For the sake of safety this summer, and after obtaining the consent of Professor McGonagall and Headmaster Dumbledore, he cautiously decided to stay at school. He planned to stay in the Forbidden Forest cabin for these 2 months. Hagrid was very happy about this, and he would also have time to continue his research. I won't be able to go back with you this year, Charles. Remember to keep training. Your current progress is still not ideal. I plan to increase the intensity next semester, so don't fall behind. Anjuin gave his 2 friends his final instructions. Vivian nodded with a smile, while Charles gave a wry smile. Anjuin had tormented him terribly this year. After sending his 2 friends on the train, Anjuin turned back to Hogwarts. At this moment, several vicious gazes stared straight at him. Damn it, that guy never leaves the school, what should we do? Wilkes said angrily in the carriage. Humph, it's all because of you. You always send people to monitor him. Anyone would know they're being watched. I told you to be more discreet, but you didn't understand? It's just stirring up a hornet's nest. Roll Yaxley stroked the few hairs that had grown on his chin. What if he keeps hiding next semester? Traverse chimed in from the side. Don't worry, that Professor Bones is no longer here, and Vanessa has also graduated. Next semester, Slytherin will be under my control, and I'll find a way to force that guy to submit. Yaxley looked at everyone, revealing a charming smile. Ha, what do you think we should do to clean up that mudblood? He actually dares to challenge the honor of pure blood families. Wilkes also smiled viciously. I want to dig out his eyes. I feel disgusted just looking at that guy's eyes. Traverse's expression was twisted, presumably thinking of some bad memories. Whatever you do, but remember, no killing, at least not at school, otherwise there will be big trouble, Yaxley reminded. I don't think those dirty mudbloods should be allowed to enroll in the first place. Dumbledore must be out of his mind, Traverse muttered hatefully. At this time, Rosier, who was also in the carriage, swallowed nervously, listening to these guys spouting nonsense. But a glimmer of hope rose in his heart. If they really got rid of Anjuin, wouldn't he no longer be controlled by others? But then he thought it wasn't right. If Anjuin revealed that Rosier had helped him, the consequences for him would be even more terrible. Have your families received any news? Where exactly is that Potter family survivor? Does anyone know what the Dark Lord's current situation is? Yaxley suddenly changed the subject and asked about Voldemort's situation. I don't know, but my uncle said that he's sure the Dark Lord didn't really die, and one day he will return, Traverse said. Yaxley glanced at Traverse. He knew that the person from the Traverse family was a fanatical believer of the Dark Lord, so it was not surprising that he had such a view. Then he glanced at Rosier and asked, what about your family? When Rosier saw Yaxley asking him, he stammered, I don't know. Father seems not very sure that the Dark Lord can return. Hearing Rosier's words, Yaxley angrily pulled up the cuff of his left hand. Everyone saw that on the inside of his left arm was a striking dark mark, a black skull with a snake spiraling out of its mouth, still wriggling slightly on the skin. Seeing Yaxley's display, everyone in the carriage showed different expressions, awe, fear, envy, and even ecstasy. Humph, the Dark Lord's mark still exists, which is the best proof. The fire of our ideals will not be extinguished. Betrayal always starts with people who are not steadfast enough. You should advise your father to uphold pure blood supremacy, which is our common interest. Yaxley said sternly, seeing Rosier's cowardly appearance. Yes, I understand. When Rosier heard Yaxley say the word betrayal, his heart skipped a beat and cold sweat almost broke out. Don't mention it. Since the Dark Lord disappeared, things haven't been easy for the various families. That woman Millicent has been watching the families every day, and the Lestranges have also been arrested. It was originally said that they planned to deal with that Professor Bones this summer, but unfortunately that guy escaped, Traverse sighed. Chapter 118. Professor Bones probably didn't expect that the information Anjuin provided him would save his own life in return. The glory of pure bloods will not fade. All filthy bloods who dare to challenge the authority of pure blood wizards should be purged, and we'll start with that mudblood who defiled Slytherin, Wilkes sneered. The others in the carriage nodded in agreement and then enthusiastically discussed how to deal with Anjuin after the summer vacation. On the other side, after returning to the hut in the Forbidden Forest, Anjuin continued his disciplined life, practicing spells every day, developing runes, researching alchemy, cooking with Hagrid, tending the vegetable garden, and so on. At the same time, he maintained good correspondence with his friends. Under Anjuin's remote supervision, Charles was still training very hard, while Vivian went abroad with her parents again. After resigning, Professor Bones developed a minor illness. Although he didn't want to admit it, it was likely the curse at work. Fortunately, he got through that period safely. At the same time, the professor still corresponded frequently with Anjuin, exchanging academic issues. The two still had many unsolved problems in alchemy and runes. On the Longbottom side, Augusta bravely supported the entire family alone. She originally wanted to invite Anjuin to spend another summer there. After all, having experienced a summer together, Augusta greatly admired Anjuin's independence and rigor. Unfortunately, Anjuin considered the safety issue, fearing that he would be a burden to Augusta, so he had to refuse the old woman, saying that he would visit as soon as he had dealt with the matters here. The Weasley family also had frequent contact with Anjuin. Molly had a very good impression of Anjuin, and with Anjuin's help to their family last year, she often cared about Anjuin's recent situation. Moreover, Bill Weasley would also be enrolling at Hogwarts next year, and Molly also asked Anjuin to take care of Bill. According to tradition, Bill should be sorted into Gryffindor after enrolling. Then let Charles help take care of him. Should he include Bill in his training program as well? A very evil idea arose in Anjuin's mind. After nearly a year of training Charles, Anjuin discovered that his training content could be replicated on others. This high-intensity training can significantly improve the various qualities of wizards. Unfortunately, the data source is very single, with only Charles. It seems that it is time to expand the training personnel. Taking advantage of the fact that the young wizards are growing, it is most suitable for this kind of basic practice. Time passed day by day, and Anjuin and Hagrid's peaceful life gradually came to an end. School was about to start. This day, near dusk, Hagrid packed his luggage and prepared to go to the station to welcome the new students. At this time, a young man also walked out of the hut next to him. Anjuin was wearing a pair of dark short leather boots, and plain black trousers were tightly tucked into the boot tubes, fastened by a belt with a silver buckle printed with an Ouroboros. A dark waist bag hung on the side of the leather bag, and several bottles of potions could be vaguely seen inserted in it. The upper body was also a plain black turtleneck shirt, matched with the meticulous college-colored tie, and a silver-black corset vest was worn outside. In addition to the college's coat of arms, there was also a silver snake-shaped brooch on the chest, plus the college robe draped outside. The whole person looked simple, solemn, and at the same time showed a low-key luxury. At this time, Anjuin's black hair had already passed his shoulders, but it was still combed neatly and cleanly behind him. Under the two sword-like eyebrows was a pair of bright bronze monocle, connected to a thin chain extending from the small pocket on the right chest, and there was also a smooth silver ring on his hand, from which a trace of could be faintly revealed. Anjuin, I'm going to pick up the new students. You go to the auditorium first, Hagrid said, carrying his kerosene lamp. Okay, Anjuin pinched the monocle and replied. Along the path, Anjuin walked through the deserted castle corridor and was the first to arrive at the auditorium. Candles were still floating in the air, illuminating the hall brightly. He came to the Slytherin long table, casually found a seat and sat down, then waited quietly. Before long, some professors entered the auditorium one after another through the side door. After seeing Anjuin sitting down early alone, they nodded to him as a greeting. After 2 years of contact, many professors appreciated this rigorous and pragmatic young man. Although they occasionally felt that he was a bit introverted and rarely appeared, he was very excellent in both study and classroom discipline. Snape also saw Anjuin after walking into the auditorium. After seeing Anjuin nodding to him as a greeting, he just coldly raised his chin. In his eyes, Anjuin was an arrogant, indifferent, somewhat capable, but arrogant guy. He was respectful on the surface, but he didn't put anyone in his eyes. If it weren't for seeing him save, he wouldn't give this guy any good looks. Severus, I really envy you. There is such an excellent young man in your academy. You don't know, Anjuin submitted a research paper on a new spell some time ago. Although it has not been translated into a spell, the effect is very powerful. Professor Flitwick chatted with Snape. At the end of the last semester, Anjuin and Professor Bones finally sorted out the development and application papers on the Echo Charm. Flitwick knew that these two often tinkered with runes together, and he was happy to see Anjuin learn from professional field masters like Bones. But when he actually saw Anjuin's paper, he was very surprised, because this spell, except for not having a spell, the structure was quite mature. After personally testing it, he found that the application prospects were quite broad, so he took the initiative to submit it to Century Spell Studies for Anjuin. Although this new rune was jointly developed by Anjuin and Professor Bones, many people would still think that the credit for the research mainly belonged to Bones, and letting Anjuin be the first author was just Professor Bones' modest gesture, but this was also a remarkable achievement. Professor Bones and Professor Flitwick have recently received many letters from scholars from all over the world, researching and discussing the Echo Charm. Perhaps they felt that Anjuin, as a second-year student, only played an assisting role, so most scholars directly bypassed Anjuin and communicated with the two masters. However, since Bones and Flitwick introduced to the correspondence that Anjuin was the main conceptualizer and developer of this new spell, he has also entered the vision of those masters and scholars in academic circles around the world. It is expected that it will not take long for Anjuin to be harassed by letters from those scholars. Chapter 119. You flatter me. Snape couldn't help but reveal a hint of smugness upon hearing Professor Flitwick's constant praise of his house's students, which slightly increased Anjuin's goodwill towards Snape. Perhaps this little rascal who attacked him wasn't entirely useless after all. While Snape was lost in thought, Headmaster Dumbledore also appeared in the Great Hall, still with his usual amiable expression. After greeting everyone, he took a seat in the center of the hall. Accompanying Dumbledore was an unfamiliar adult wizard, who looked to be in his late 20s, with a worried expression as he sat down at the staff table. Is that this year's defense against the dark arts professor? Why does he look like he's constipated? Anjuin thought to himself. Before Anjuin could observe for long, the doors of the Great Hall were opened, and the students from 2nd to 7th year gradually entered the hall, immediately filling the entire hall with noise and chatter. Anjuin. Vivian saw Anjuin sitting at the long table and quickly rushed over. Long time no see, Vivian. How was your summer vacation? Anjuin smiled at Vivian. It was all right. Did you finish your summer homework? Let me copy it later. I spent the whole summer playing mahjong at home, and only remembered about the homework on the train back. Vivian sat down and began chattering anxiously to Anjuin. Anjuin couldn't help but rub his forehead in exasperation. How did he become friends with such an unreliable girl? Just as he was taking out his homework, the pure-blood students walked into the hall. As they entered, everyone intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Anjuin, their malice impossible to hide. Vivian, sitting next to him, couldn't help but shrink back when she saw them enter, and whispered to Anjuin, "You don't know how arrogant these guys have been this year. Last year, they only bullied those who didn't want to take sides, but this year, they acted like they owned the place as soon as they got on the train. They even went to every compartment with Slytherin students and warned them that they had to obey Yaxley's orders this year, and that no one was allowed to talk to you or have any contact with you, saying that being around you would be contaminating." Anjuin frowned slightly upon hearing this, and whispered, "Isn't Voldemort gone? How dare they act so rampantly?" Humph, Yaxley became head boy this year, and Wilkes was also elected prefect. They act as if the Dark Lord never disappeared, even more arrogant than before. Last year, Higgs, who was kicked off the Quidditch team for arguing back, was slapped twice by Wilkes, right on the train. It's simply outrageous. Vivian excitedly described the scenes she had witnessed on the way here. Yaxley and the others walked to the front of the long table, patted the shoulders of a few students who were already seated, squeezed them aside, or drove them to the back of the table, and then sat down together, chatting animatedly. To destroy them, one must first make them mad. It seems they haven't recognized the situation yet. Don't worry, soon you won't have to worry about those guys anymore. Anjuin muttered, his eyes gleaming as he watched the pure-blood's arrogant expressions. Vivian frowned in confusion upon hearing this, and was about to ask something when Anjuin said, "Since they told you that, how dare you still talk to me?" Humph. Vivian wore a proud expression. "I'm not afraid of them. Let them try to provoke me if they dare. Our mahjong club isn't just for show." Seeing Vivian so confident, Anjuin smiled and nodded, then stopped paying attention to those guys. Soon, Professor McGonagall led a group of first-year students in their new wizard robes into the hall. Most of the students had nervous and uneasy expressions on their faces, clearly frightened by the so-called sorting ceremony. From afar, Anjuin saw Bill in the crowd. His fiery red hair made it hard not to notice him. After a year, Bill hadn't changed much except for growing taller. Bill, who had been looking around, also noticed Anjuin at the Slytherin table. Looking at the changed and familiar figure, Bill wasn't even sure if it was the same Anjuin he had met last year, until Anjuin nodded to Bill, and Bill gave him a cheerful smile. Just as the two made eye contact, Professor McGonagall began calling out the names on the sorting list from the podium. Ibu Gamper. A bewildered young wizard walked out of the crowd and, guided by Professor McGonagall, sat down on the stool beside her. Slytherin. The sorting hat had barely been placed on the boy's head before it quickly shouted out the house name. Bill Weasley. After a while, Bill's name was called. Bill adjusted his clothes slightly nervously and sat down on the stool. Gryffindor. Similarly, without much hesitation, the sorting hat quickly shouted out the house name. As expected. Anjuin smiled and muttered. The sorting ceremony continued, with students from each house welcoming the new students with applause and cheers. The first boy to be sorted sat down opposite Anjuin. This was not surprising, as everyone was afraid to get too close to Anjuin due to the threats from Yaxley and the others, so there were empty seats all around him except for Vivian. "Why you, hello, I'm Ibu Gamper." The shy boy, who had just sat down, mustered his courage to greet the handsome boy in front of him. "Hello, I'm Anjuin Wilson, you can call me Anjuin." Anjuin replied with a smile. "Hey, Ibu, can I call you that? I'm Vivian Bulstrode." Vivian also greeted the shy boy with a smile. "Why yes, you can call me Ibu or Gamper. I know the Bulstrode name, my grandmother's maiden name was Bulstrode." Ibu seemed to have found a relative, and spoke much more fluently. "Haha, then we're relatives. But then again, it's not hard to find a relative in Slytherin." Vivian joked, half complaining. "Hehe, my father also said that holding a banquet in Slytherin is like a family dinner, everyone can claim a relationship." Ibu also laughed. "Speaking of which, the name Gamper sounds familiar, let me think." Vivian scratched her head and thought for a moment. "Ah, I remember, didn't your family produce a minister for magic?" "I remember, it was Adeline Gamper, he served as minister in the last century, and had a pretty good reputation." Chapter 120. Ivor's face flushed slightly, then he nodded with a hint of pride. Anjuin glanced at the two in surprise. He knew that Vivian was good at the history of magic, but he didn't expect her to even know the name. He couldn't tell that this shy boy was actually from a prestigious family. Minister Adeline Gamble established a committee during her term to investigate the intelligence of Muggles, and confirmed that Muggles' intelligence appeared to be much greater than wizards thought. She was also a minister who was relatively close to Muggles and was very loved during her term. Vivian recounted the history she knew to Anjuin as if reciting a treasure. Ivor, sitting opposite her, blushed with embarrassment as Vivian kept praising his ancestor. "Yes," Ivor said with a smile, "since that ancestor, our family has been dedicated to studying Muggles. 2 Muggle studies professors have come from our family. My grandmother is also a Muggle, and we now live in a Muggle community. I even went to their kindergarten when I was a child." Ivor wasn't so nervous anymore and even talked to the two about his childhood. It was clear that he had made many Muggle friends when he was young. "Your thoughts are dangerous." As the three were chatting, a discordant voice interrupted them. They turned their heads and saw Wilkes walking over. Wilkes glanced at Anjuin and continued to say to Ivor, "Muggle-borns are just inferior beings. As a Slytherin, you should know where you belong. Don't always hang out with disreputable people." After saying that, he glanced at Anjuin intentionally or unintentionally. At this time, Ivor looked at Wilkes with a loss, then looked at Anjuin, and muttered in a low voice, "But, many of my Muggle friends are very smart and are no different from us." "Humph! Wilkes, this is none of your business. What are you doing here? Are you trying to disturb our dinner?" Vivian slammed the table and glared at Wilkes. As a prefect, is there a problem with me caring about the new students of the academy? I'm just worried that young people who are new to the world will be led astray," Wilkes sneered. Vivian was so angry at his sarcastic words that she was about to get up to argue, but Anjuin quickly grabbed her shoulder and pressed her back into her seat. "It seems that someone has forgotten the pain after their wounds have healed. It doesn't matter, say whatever you want, and I will write it down one by one." Anjuin smiled slightly and actually took out a notebook, opened it, and stared straight at Wilkes. Wilkes felt his hair stand on end from Anjuin's stare, and he recalled some unpleasant memories from the previous semester. He could only snort coldly and turn to leave. "Humph, coward! You scared him so much that he ran away with his tail between his legs. He must be afraid that you will write down his words and report them to the headmaster, and then he'll be removed from his position as prefect," Vivian sarcastically said angrily. Knowing what was going on, Anjuin didn't say much, but instead looked at Ivor apologetically. "Sorry, you had to see this as soon as you entered the academy." It's nothing. Is that the prefect of our academy? He looks so fierce." Scared by Wilkes, Ivor stuttered again. "Don't pay attention to that guy. He's no good. What else can he do besides bullying people?" Vivian complained grumpily. Seeing Vivian also looking fierce, Ivor could only nod nervously. The sorting ceremony ended quickly, and the grand welcome dinner officially began. Facing the sumptuous dinner in front of them, all the young wizards happily enjoyed it. After the dinner, under Dumbledore's command, after singing the painful school song, the young wizards returned to their respective common rooms in an orderly manner. Back in the common room, Rory Yaxley, who was already the head boy, stopped everyone and began his speech. Hello everyone, I am the Slytherin male prefect and head boy. I represent Slytherin House in welcoming all of you new students. Yaxley looked at all the new students with a smile and led the applause to welcome everyone. Up to this point, his words were nothing special, but soon his style changed abruptly. Presumably, everyone knows what Slytherin House is. We are born noble, shrewd, ambitious, and determined. We admire power and honor. You should be proud to be assigned to our house. Yaxley looked around and continued, at the same time, we are also representatives of blood and purity. Maintaining the purity of blood is our natural duty. The current wizarding world is in a mess. All kinds of dirty things that pop up from nowhere have the nerve to claim to be wizards. They want to challenge our position and reputation, steal our jobs, and even want to overstep their bounds and rule and manage the wizarding world. This is simply a disgrace. The many pure-blood wizards in the audience applauded and cheered, helping to create momentum, and the students with less firm positions were also driven by this and couldn't help but applaud. Not to mention those young wizards who had just entered the academy, who were originally unclear about the situation and were swept up in the influence of the crowd and applauded. Seeing that the effect was good, Yaxley raised his hand and gently pressed down, and everyone obeyed the order to quiet down. So in Slytherin, we must take the lead in safeguarding the interests of pure bloods, and eliminate all connections with muggles. Quirk Wilkes, Millie Osbert, Sample Traverse, you few come up. At Yaxley's call, Wilkes, Traverse, and Osbert, a sixth-year female prefect, walked up the steps together. Next, we will establish a purity committee in Slytherin, which will be responsible for handling muggle affairs within the academy. The three of them and I are the heads of this committee, and everyone must abide by it. Yaxley spread his hands to the three people standing beside him, signaling them to come forward and speak. Traverse took the lead in speaking. Remember the faces of the three of us. When we come, it means the committee is here to inspect. No one else can control you except us, understand? Traverse shouted arrogantly to the crowd below the steps. Understood. The other pure-blood wizards in the audience took the lead in responding, and the other young wizards had no choice but to follow. Let me introduce, this is the president of our academy's purity committee, Senior Wilkes, call him Senior. Traverse pointed to Traverse beside him and introduced him to everyone. Hello, Senior. In a scattering of shouts, Wilkes stood up straight with his head held high.